Chapter 495. It started to rain. The rain was not heavy, but it was a little cold, which swept away the heat of late summer and early autumn. Standing at the gate of the Yuhui nunnery, when Shichi looked back at the tall Buddhist hall of the nunnery behind him. The layered Buddhist hall looked a little more leisurely in the drizzle, but it was not the scene in his dream. There was also a drizzle in his dream, but he was lying in front of the couch by the window, with a slender figure of a woman sitting beside him. He could not see her face clearly, but he knew that she was gently feeding him medicine. She reached out her hand to gently wipe his forehead, and then smiled with watery eyes. In the dream, he could not see clearly who the woman was, but he inexplicably thought of Xiao Wanru. After waking up, he unconsciously compared the figure in the dream with Xiao Wanru, but in fact, there was no comparison at all. The Xiao Wanru he saw was the Xiao Wanru from 2 years ago. Not to mention her small figure, even her figure was different from that of the woman in the dream. But inexplicably, he felt that this person seemed to be Xiao Wanru, who had grown up. He wanted to take the opportunity of coming to the Yuhui nunnery to see Xiao Wanru and verify whether she was the woman in his dream. In fact, the woman in his dream did not appear in his dream very often, but he had dreamed of the same woman 3 times in a row, which made Shichi want to find out the truth. He reached out to touch his head and looked at the servant beside him holding an umbrella for him. He inexplicably felt that he really worried too much. It was just a dream, but he actually took it seriously. In particular, he even associated it with Xiao Wanru, who had nothing to do with him at all. It was really a joke. He had always been sober in the past, but now he was confused. He looked back at the Yuhui nunnery behind him, wondering how the girl who looked smart 2 years ago was now. However, no matter how she was, it had nothing to do with him. After all, she had an extraordinary identity now. If she needed help in the future, he would definitely help her. Not to mention that he had misunderstood her, he should thank her for helping him recognize Gu Shishu's true colors. But it was not necessary for him to thank her in person. There was a difference between men and women, and they might never have a chance to meet each other in the future. His heart inexplicably became heavy. Then he smiled helplessly. "Child, are we going back to the mansion now?" Seeing Shichi get in the carriage, the coachman asked. "Go to Prince Yu's mansion." Shichi thought for a while and said, "Let's go to Prince Yu's mansion." Although the Ministry of Justice was in charge of what happened in the Yuhui nunnery, Prince Yu was in charge of it in the end, so it had to be reported to him in the end. Originally, this matter was handled by the Minister of the Ministry of Justice. Although Shichi got an important position, he was only a subordinate official of the Ministry of Justice. However, he was good at writing, so the Minister of the Ministry of Justice valued him very much. A few days ago, he asked Shichi to draw up a detailed memorial for this matter and send it to Prince Yu's mansion for Prince Yu to present to the emperor. Although what happened in the Yuhui nunnery was a big deal and even alarmed the emperor, there was no trace of it after that. No one knew where the black-clad man who appeared in the Yuhui nunnery that night came from and what his purpose was. No one was missing inside the high wall. Except for a few dead people, the rest were all there. The Minister of the Ministry of Justice was also very flustered about a case that had not been found out but was reported to the emperor. Therefore, he presented the memorial to Prince Yu first. To put it bluntly, Shichi was a ghostwriter and an errand runner. The coachman obeyed, turned the carriage around, and drove it to Prince Yu's mansion at the foot of the mountain. Shichi lifted the curtain again and involuntarily looked at the depths of the Yuhui nunnery. It had been more than 2 years since Xiao Wanru entered the Yuhui nunnery. In another half a year, she should go down the mountain. It seemed that Duke Xing's mansion would not be peaceful. Since his mansion was adjacent to Duke Xing's mansion, he might be able to help Duke Xing's mansion in some small matters. Shichi wholeheartedly wanted to help Xiao Wanru in order to repay her kindness of reminding him at that time. Unexpectedly, things were unpredictable. In the end, he went against Xiao Wanru. The Yuhui nunnery became quiet again, which made Xiao Wanru very happy. When Qing came to report that all the officials of the Ministry of Justice had withdrawn from the Yuhui nunnery, Xiao Wanru came out for a walk. It was drizzling outside, making the whole mountain seem to be covered with a layer of mist. In the mist, people felt more relaxed and happy, and the mountain was ethereal. The rain in the Yuhui nunnery was very beautiful. Standing in the corridor and looking at everything outside the courtyard, Xiao Wanru's mind seemed to be much more open. It was very quiet in the courtyard. Several servant girls were busy with their own things, and no one came to disturb Xiao Wanru's peaceful mood at the moment. But then the courtyard door was knocked loudly. "Go and have a look," Xiao Wanru said to Qing who was standing in the corridor. Qing answered and ran to the courtyard door. As soon as she opened it, a person rushed in. She was so scared that she took 2 steps back and almost fell. She pulled the door and looked at the woman in front of her in astonishment. "Who are you?" Qing didn't know her. She had just come to Xiao Wanru's side and was not familiar with the people in the nunnery. "Is your miss here?" The woman looked a little embarrassed. She looked up and saw Xiao Wanru in the corridor at once, so she ran over in a hurry. "Miss Mo, what's wrong with you?" Yu Jie, who knew her, hurried forward to greet her. It was a woman named Mo Chiui, who also lived in the Yuhui nunnery and cultivated in seclusion. She was also the person whom Chu Liuxin mistook that day. She had lived on the mountain for a period of time, longer than Xiao Wanru. It was said that she was a relative of a nun in the Yuhui nunnery and had no other relatives alive, so she came to the Yuhui nunnery to cultivate in seclusion. She had met Xiao Wanru several times in the past, but they didn't keep in touch. "Fifth Miss Xiao, can you do me a favor?" Mo Chiui came over and bowed to Xiao Wanru first. Her face looked a little pale, and her hair was wet on her forehead, covering her beautiful face. "What's the matter?" Xiao Wanru looked her up and down and said gently. "I have a good friend from the same hometown who came to the Yuhui nunnery and wanted to stay with me for a few days. I didn't expect such a thing to happen suddenly. Although the officials of the Ministry of Justice have left, they are still checking at the foot of the mountain. Fifth Miss Xiao, could you please ask Rui and Great Elder Princess to take her down the mountain when she goes down the mountain?" Mo Chiui wiped the rain on her head and said with a gasp. "Didn't the officials of the Ministry of Justice see her on the mountain?" Xiao Wanru looked at Mo Chiui's anxious face and asked in confusion. If they had found out the truth on the mountain, even if the officials of the Ministry of Justice were there when they went down the mountain, they would just ask about it as a routine. "I asked her to hide out before. She came here to find me, because she wanted to stay with me temporarily. She was forced to marry an old man in his 70s or 80s. Mo Chiui bit her lip and said helplessly, "I didn't dare to let others see her. Every time someone came to ask about her, I asked her to go to the back mountain." The back mountain of the Yuhui nunnery was actually very large, and there were some scenic spots for people to enjoy. However, there were also some inaccessible places. Even though the Yuhui nunnery was nearby, the dense places with cliffs and precipices were dangerous even for people who were agile. Therefore, the nuns in the Yuhui nunnery would not go there. "You asked her to hide in the deep mountain behind the Yuhui nunnery? It's too dangerous there. She might lose her life if she is careless." Xiao Wanru raised her watery eyes slightly and said in astonishment. "But we have no choice." She said that if she was really found and sent back to her family, she would rather die than get married. Mo Chiui said helplessly. No one would be willing to marry an old man in his 70s or 80s. She would indeed feel that her life was worse than death. Xiao Wanru fell silent for a moment and did not agree immediately. "I heard that Fifth Miss Xiao is the granddaughter of Rui and Great Elder Princess. If Great Elder Princess can take her down the mountain, she will definitely be able to avoid the investigation of the Ministry of Justice. I hope Fifth Miss Xiao will be kind enough to help her." Mo Chiui bowed deeply to Xiao Wanru and said eagerly, ignoring her embarrassed look. Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat and a trace of hesitation flashed across her eyes. "Fifth Miss Xiao, I beg you. You practice in the mountain and observe mourning for your parents. It can be seen that you are a filial person. You won't leave a helpless girl in danger. If she is really caught, she really doesn't want to live. She has been very stubborn since she was a child, so she ran away from the marriage. If fifth Miss Xiao doesn't save her, I'm afraid that she will go to extremes again. Mo Chioi's tears fell down one by one, and she looked extremely pitiful. Miss Mo, I'm afraid it's not convenient for my grandma. But if you can wait for a few days, when people from my mansion come here, I'll ask them to take your fellow villager down the mountain, okay? Xiao Wanru asked softly. Fifth Miss Xiao, I know that your mansion is from Duke Xing's mansion, but how can the servants of Duke Xing's mansion compare with the carriage of Rui and Great Elder Princess? If she can get the protection of Rui and Great Elder Princess, she will definitely be safer. Mo Chioi wiped away her tears and looked at Xiao Wanru imploringly. Moreover, it's better to do it as soon as possible. If someone finds out that she is here, I'm afraid that she will lose her life. Where is Miss Mo's hometown? Is it very close to here? Xiao Wanru asked in surprise. It's indeed not very far, so I'm especially afraid that someone will find it. Please take pity on her, fifth Miss Xiao. Mo Chioi said vaguely. This time, even Chu Lu could tell that something was wrong. She walked behind Xiao Wanru in a few steps and looked at Mo Chioi with burning eyes. She was very suspicious of Miss Mo, who could be regarded as her close neighbor. Miss Mo was too impatient. Could it be that it was so urgent that people in their 70s or 80s immediately came to the mountain? Miss Mo, I can't make the decision for my grandma. If you can wait for a few days, I'll definitely arrange for your fellow villager to leave in a few days, and I'll definitely not let anyone find it, in case your fellow villager gets hurt. Xiao Wanru said softly with an increasingly gentle look. Mo Chioi's expression changed, and she suddenly stood up straight. Fifth Miss Xiao, if you can help me, just do it. If you really don't want to help, just don't help me. Why do you have to find so many reasons to prevaricate? After saying that, she turned around and ran out. Hey, miss, why is she like this? Chu Lu was so angry that she wanted to stop Mo Chioi. However, Mo Chioi had already run out of the yard and disappeared. Miss, what does she want to do? She can't even wait for a moment. Even if her fellow villager doesn't want to get married, she doesn't have to make it so urgent. I heard that Miss Mo's hometown is very far from here. Even if she finds her fellow villager on the mountain, she won't get the news so soon and come to catch her. Moreover, you have promised her that you will help her. Yu Jie, who had seen farther, couldn't help asking at this time. I don't know what she wants to do, but it's not a good time to get my grandma involved. Xiao Wanru's face darkened. Looking at the boundless drizzle, she suddenly thought of something, a thing that had nothing to do with her in her last life, and her eyes involuntarily became cold. Chapter 496. Did something happen to Rui and Great Elder Princess in the last life? She was a little confused. After all, these things were too far away from her. She was just a painter who entered the imperial palace to paint portraits for beauties temporarily. How could she know these things in the royal family? She seemed to have a vague feeling that Rui and Great Elder Princess had an accident because of a woman, which seemed to have something to do with the Yuhui nunnery. On that day, 2 palace maids were secretly gossiping, and she happened to be hiding from Xiao Yanru, who came in anger, and also hid in the bushes. So she overheard them at that time. The late emperor. Great Elder Princess, the woman surnamed Mo confessed. Yuhui nunnery. Bits and pieces of memory came to her mind. Mo Chioi had lived near her for so long, but she had never thought of this matter. At this time, it was suddenly mentioned. If she guessed correctly according to these bits and pieces of memory and words, Mo Chioi should be the one who confessed Great Elder Princess in the last life. But Xiao Wanru couldn't figure out what exactly she confessed and what rebellious thing Great Elder Princess had done to make a stranger confess it. They were not from the same place. Mo Chioi had been on the mountain for many years. She heard that she had been well behaved for so many years. Besides, she also helped to do some things in the Yuhui nunnery and usually stayed in her yard. It was impossible for her grandma to have any contact with her. But if it was not her, this woman was too suspicious. Who was her fellow villager? Why did she insist on being taken by her grandma? Could she assume that she also found her grandma in the last life and asked her grandma to take a person down the mountain? Something big had happened in the Yuhui nunnery, but it had not been found out yet. Could it be related to Mo Chiui's fellow villager? Then her so-called fellow villager was a big problem. Her watery eyes became more and more thoughtful. No matter whether it was related to Mo Chiui in the last life or not, there must be something wrong with Mo Chiui. When will grandma come? After taking a deep breath, Xiao Wanru slowly calmed down her depression, and a pair of bright and beautiful eyes showed a bit of coldness. These days, Rui and Great Elder Princess often came to chat with her. The two of them got along very well and warmly. The Great Elder Princess should be here. This servant will go to the door to take a look. Qing trotted out. She was the youngest and the most carefree among them. She looked very innocent, but she was sent here by Chu Luqian. Xiao Wanru sent a maid who knew martial arts to protect herself. If there was anything special, she could ask her to call for help. Chu Luqian sent another secret guard, who was also under Qing's command. Miss, that woman stopped Great Elder Princess. Qing suddenly shouted at the door. Xiao Wanru walked to the door. Yu Jie took a big umbrella beside her and held it up to block the rain for Xiao Wanru. The rain was not heavy, but it kept falling. The ground was wet. Just a few feet away from the gate of the courtyard, Mo Chiui knelt in front of Rui and Great Elder Princess, kowtowing and crying, begging Rui and Great Elder Princess. Rui and Great Elder Duke was cold-faced and soft-hearted. When he saw such a delicate little girl kneeling in front of him, he couldn't help but he began to ask questions. Xiao Wanru was far away. When she walked over slowly, she saw that Mo Chiui stood up and seemed to be about to whisper something in Rui and Great Elder Princess's ear. Xiao Wanru had a bad feeling. She reached out to pick up a stone beside her and threw it at Mo Chiui. Seeing that, Qing hurriedly picked up another larger stone. She weighed it in her hand and threw it at Mo Chiui. Xiao Wanru didn't hit it accurately. The stone fell to one side, but everyone was shocked and looked up to see who was so rude. Great Elder Princess, you must save this person. She is your. Mo Chiui ignored the stone and continued to whisper to Great Elder Princess. Speaking of this, she couldn't help screaming in pain. Her body was thrown to one side by the stone and she almost fell. Qing's stone. Seeing that her beloved granddaughter came over, Rui and Great Elder Princess showed a kind smile and raised her head. She ignored Mo Chiui and didn't care about Mo Chiui's words. Mo Chiui felt bad. At this time, she couldn't tell the truth to Rui and Great Elder Princess in a low voice even if she wanted to. She could only stare at Xiao Wanru with hatred. It turned out that Xiao Wanru ruined her plan again. Grandma, did I ask you to take a person down the mountain? Xiao Wanru walked over quickly and said softly. She sounds so pitiful. Rui and Great Elder Princess reached out to touch Xiao Wanru's head. Finding that it was a little wet, she said hurriedly, "Why did you come out? It's raining. If you get wet, you will get sick easily. I came to pick up Grandma. She begged me just now and asked me to tell you about it so that you could take the person down the mountain. There are many things in Yuhui Nunnery. I don't know what happened before. I don't want to make trouble for Grandma, so I asked her to wait for a few days. In a few days, I will find a way to help her fellow villager." I didn't expect Miss Mo to get angry. She scolded me and came to stop Grandma by herself. Xiao Wanru calmly glanced at Mo Chiui, who was standing beside her with her head down, and said. She confirmed again that there was something wrong with this girl. At the moment when Mo Chiui walked over, she couldn't be mistaken. The hatred in Mo Chiui's eyes almost overflowed. What did she do to make her hate her so much? Could it be that I didn't agree to help her find her maternal grandmother? If that's the case, then this Miss Mo is really narrow-minded. She hates others to death when others don't want to help her. What's the meaning of this? Xiao Wanru said casually. But Rui, an great elder princess, who was a member of the royal family, immediately understood some of the meaning in it. She nodded at once and looked at Imo Chui. Miss, I can't help you with this. After saying that, she turned around and left with Xiao Wanru without waiting for Imo Chui to raise her head. Rui, an great elder princess, thought that Imo Chui was not a good person because her granddaughter's kindness was rewarded with a scolding. Moreover, the accident in the Yuhui nunnery was related to the former emperor's S. She knew many S of the former emperor. At this time, she should avoid arousing suspicion. If it was in the past, Rui, an great elder princess, might be more casual. She really dared to do something that others dared not do. But now she had Xiao Wanru and her younger brother. Naturally, she could not be too willful. She didn't want to get involved in some things, especially this kind of thing that was related to the former emperor and the current emperor. Seeing Rui, an great elder princess, leave with a large group of people, Mo Chui almost gnashed her teeth with hatred. She almost could have done it. Unexpectedly, Xiao Wanru ruined it. Looking at Xiao Wanru's back with hatred, Mo Chui knew that she could only think of another way to solve this problem. She turned around and strode away in the rain. She still had a way to solve this problem. Back in the silence room, Xiao Wanru helped great elder princess to sit down. Then she took the tea served by Yu Jie and took a sip. Grandma, what did she say just now? It seems that she wants to tell it to you in private. Putting down the teacup in her hand, Xiao Wanru asked curiously. She tilted her head slightly, and the delicate little girl looked a little innocent and lovely. Seeing this, great elder princess's heart softened. She said casually, she said it was about her fellow countrymen. She saved me to help her and said that I would not regret it. Later, seeing that I didn't agree, she said that she would tell me the identity of her fellow countrymen. What's the identity of her fellow countrymen? Xiao Wanru's heart tightened. I don't know. She didn't say it later. I don't know her identity. Could it be that a miss of a family in the capital city ran away from her marriage? I haven't heard that a miss of a family wants to marry an old man because her family doesn't like her. Rui, an great elder princess, felt it was funny. Speaking of this, she was still very confused about how that woman found out about her. Seeing her kneeling in the mud, she did sympathize with her for a moment and wanted to agree with her impulsively. Being reminded by her granddaughter, she also knew that it was not appropriate to do this, especially at this moment. When the former emperor's concubines had an accident, he should be on guard against people with royal blood like her. It would be unwise if she bumped into them at this time and found out something. It was better to avoid trouble. Zhuozhua and her younger brother were still young. Without her support, they might be bullied badly. In this regard, great elder princess felt that she should be cautious in the future. Grandma, is there anything among the former emperor's concubines that can make a fuss? Aren't they all childless concubines? Xiao Wanru turned the teacup in front of her, blinked her smart watery eyes, and looked more and more curious. Only a trace of deepness flashed across her eyes. She always felt that there was something behind it. But she couldn't figure it out for a while. Only her grandma, who seemed to know a lot of inside information, might know something. I don't know what they are making a fuss about. They are just childless concubines. It's impossible that the former emperor has a posthumous son. Great elder princess shook her head casually. She really didn't understand why anyone would pay attention to those women who were locked up. Chu Luchen was the only son of the former emperor, and he was still so sick and weak. Even if someone wanted to make use of him, they couldn't do anything. Grandma, is it true that the former emperor only has Prince Chen as his son? Xiao Wanru didn't show it on her face, but her heart was slightly moved. Of course, he is the only one. There is no other one. It's impossible for the former emperor to have other bloodlines. Even if those concubines are rescued, so what? Rui, an great elder princess, sneered. At this moment, she decided to make decisions as the first princess of the royal family, so she didn't feel ridiculed for some people's secret plots. Xiao Wanru fell silent for a while, and her watery eyes narrowed tightly. There was such a person in the last life. She didn't know whether he really had the former emperor's bloodline, but he just said so, but he didn't officially recognize it. If there was really a posthumous son, why didn't he get the emperor's approval? But if he was not, why did he treat him very well at that time? Xiao Wanru only hated that she died early and didn't figure out many things. In addition, she lost her memory, so she didn't know many things and was confused. Chapter 497. Fifth Miss, Old Madam asked me to come to the Yuhui Nunnery to tell you that Old Madam will come to the Yuhui Nunnery to see you in a few days. By the way, she will worship the Buddha, pray for blessings for the mansion, and give you a birthday gift. The person who came was Nanny Yu, who served Old Madam. When she saw Xiao Wanru, she stepped forward with a smile and bowed. Although she had been serving Old Madam for a long time and had always been respected in the mansion, she was still very well behaved when facing Xiao Wanru, especially when Rui, a great elder princess, was sitting beside her and eyeing her covetously. Your Old Madam is really considerate. Aren't you afraid that your fifth Miss's life will be shortened? Rui, a great elder princess, sneered. Hearing this, Nanny Yu secretly felt bad. There was a knot between Rui, a great elder princess, and her Old Madam. This knot did not disappear with time, but became more and more intense. Old Madam hasn't seen the fifth Miss for so long and misses her very much. Recently, such a thing happened in the Yuhui Nunnery. Old Madam is really worried, so she came to the Yuhui Nunnery to see the fifth Miss on the pretext of celebrating her birthday. Nanny Yu explained with a smile. She is so young, and she is cultivating in the Yuhui Nunnery and observing mourning for her parents. Does your Old Madam want to make it a big deal or make a big deal so that Zhuozhua can't rest in the Yuhui Nunnery? The great elder princess's voice grew colder. Nanny Yu's face changed. In fact, she had tactfully told Old Madam about this matter at the beginning, that it was indeed inappropriate to celebrate the birthday of the fifth Miss, who was observing filial piety and cultivating here, in the Yuhui Nunnery. However, after listening to the first Miss's words, Old Madam felt that it was a good idea to hold a wedding here, and it was a good time. Something happened in the Yuhui Nunnery. As a grandmother, she was worried about her granddaughter, so she came to visit her on her birthday. This showed that Old Madam was kind to the fifth Miss, and it also showed that Old Madam really loved the fifth Mississippi. It was not the rumor that all the people in Duke Xing's mansion disliked the fifth Mississippi. Go back and tell your Madam Dowager that if she really wants to treat Zhuozhua well, don't mention anything about her birthday. She can give her a birthday gift if she wants to. Seeing Nanny Yu's expression, Rui, a great elder princess, immediately understood. She smiled gently and said with a bit of coldness. She glanced at the pile of gifts on the ground and said, "Take these gifts back. How can Zhuozhua wear this kind of brocade clothes at this time? Or is it that when the young miss of your family lives here, she always wears such colorful clothes?" Xiao Wanru's eyes followed Rui, a great elder princess's words, and fell on the pile of gifts. There were several bolts of brocade in bright red and green, the brightest colors. It couldn't be said that such a bright color was wrong. In fact, this bright color was very suitable for a young girl like Xiao Wanru. But this was not the right place. He tugged at the gray robe on his body, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly, revealing a faint mocking smile. Her lip color was much brighter than that of ordinary people. Even if she didn't wear lipstick, people would think that her lip color was too enchanting and charming. If she wore such a bright color, who would believe that she was really practicing in the Yuhui Nunnery and observing filial piety for her mother? When Xiao Yanru went down the mountain before, the first thing she did was to promote her reputation. Now that she was going down the mountain, she would trample on her reputation. She was so scheming. She treated others as fools. If she hadn't seen the brocade in the box, with today's scene and the brocade from Old Madam today, the previous dress would have been hers even if it hadn't been hers. She raised her long eyelashes and looked at the 8 maids behind Nanny Yu. This was a big scene, and she believed that many people had seen it on the way here. This is part of the birthday gift from Old Madam to the 5th Mississippi. Since it has been brought here, I'm afraid that Old Madam will be angry if I take it back. Nanny Yu said uneasily. She turned to Xiao Wanru and said, 5th Miss, do you want to accept it first? Since you don't like it very much, you can't refuse Old Madam's gift. I dare not refuse it. Nanny Yu, it's not that I can't accept it, but it's not appropriate for me to accept this kind of brocade in the Yuhui nunnery now. If Old Madam really loves me, she will naturally know this. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. She narrowed her watery eyes slightly and said softly. If she really loved Old Madam, she would naturally know that it was not appropriate to give it away like this. If she didn't love Old Madam, why did she have to pretend to be sympathetic? Xiao Wanru's words could be said to be extremely impolite. You can go back. Come on, send them out. Rui and Great Elder Princess ordered impolitely. Nanny Gao, who was standing beside her, waved her hand, and several maids immediately went over to help clean up and put away the things placed here. There were 8 maids, no more and no less. Nanny Gao came over to take Nanny Yu's hand and pushed her out with a smile. Although the expression on her face was kind, her actions were not kind at all. Seeing Nanny Yu go out, the 8 maids of Duke Xing's mansion looked at each other and then looked at Rui and Great Elder Princess, who had a cold face and was extremely dignified. They were so scared that they lowered their heads and hurriedly followed Nanny Yu out. Nanny Yu, please. Great Elder Princess is in a bad mood now. You'd better go back first. Let's go. I'll see you out. Nanny Gao took Nanny Yu's hand intimately and pulled her out. Nanny Yu originally wanted to struggle, but when she heard her words, she immediately stopped struggling and went out with Nanny Gao helplessly, hand in hand. Great Elder Princess was in a bad mood, so even Old Madam didn't dare to provoke her. If she bumped into Great Elder Princess now, she would be courting death. Originally, there were 8 maids from Duke Xing's mansion, plus Nanny Yu. Now there were 16 maids, plus Nanny Yu and Nanny Gao. They sent the gifts to the gate of the Yuhui nunnery in a more powerful manner than before. The people who saw them on the way were all dumbfounded. Someone had seen Nanny Yu go in before, and now they saw the gifts come back and Nanny Gao send them out. Some people had already begun to talk about this matter. Some well-informed people immediately knew that it was a gift from Duke Xing's mansion to the 5th Miss, who was cultivating in seclusion and observing mourning here. When they saw those red and green gifts, they thought that the 5th Miss, who was cultivating in seclusion, couldn't let go of these gorgeous and vulgar things. Now that they were sent back, they thought that even the 5th Miss didn't know the gifts were sent. They didn't know which master of Duke Xing's mansion sent these gifts. They really didn't know the rules. Nanny Yu was helplessly pulled out by Nanny Gao. Xiao Wanru stood up, walked to the box beside her, and took out the gorgeous clothes. She turned around and walked to Rui and Great Elder Princess. She handed the clothes to Great Elder Princess and said, Grandma, do you think the collar is made of colorful yarn? Great Elder Princess looked at the box in the corner in surprise and then looked at the clothes in Xiao Wanru's hands. She suddenly felt distressed. Xiao Wanru was in the prime of her life and had such a beautiful appearance, but she was locked in the Yuhui nunnery. She couldn't even wear the beautiful clothes she liked and could only hide them secretly. For a moment, she became more and more angry with Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion. If it weren't for that muddle-headed old woman, how could her granddaughter fall into such a situation? Grandma, can't you see it? Xiao Wanru didn't notice that Great Elder Princess was absent-minded. She thought that Great Elder Princess couldn't see it for a while, or the colorful yarn was not very obvious. So she shook her sleeves and asked again. This time, Great Elder Princess finally woke up. She reached out to touch the collar, picked it up and looked at it against the light. After a while, she confirmed, this is the material of colorful yarn. Why is it so little? Zhuozhuo likes it. Grandma, I will go to the Empress Dowager tomorrow and see if she has this kind of colorful yarn so that I can make a set of clothes for Zhuozhuo. Xiao Wanru was stunned at first, and then she understood Great Elder Princess's misunderstanding. She burst into laughter. What's wrong? Is what Grandma said wrong? Rui, and Great Elder Princess was confused by her laughter and looked at Yujie, who was also smiling sweetly. Great Elder Princess, this set of clothes doesn't belong to our young Mississippi. It has always been in that box. This box was there before our young Miss came and it has always been locked. That day, our young Miss asked this servant to break open the box and found this set of clothes inside. Yujie hurriedly explained with a smile. There was a lot of information in her words. The more Rui and Great Elder Princess heard, the more her face darkened. She picked up the clothes at hand and looked at them, and her face immediately became cold. Zhuozhua, the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion is up to no good. Grandma, do you think so? I think so too, but I don't know how I got in her way. I haven't even met her. Xiao Wanru stopped smiling and said with a confused look. When Xiao Yanru came that day, Xiao Wanru hid, so they didn't really meet each other. There is no good person in Duke Xing's mansion. Like mother, like daughter. Her mother is black-hearted. It's no wonder that her daughter is good. Rui and Great Elder Princess sneered angrily and shook the clothes in her hand. At first glance, I can tell that this dress is very good. It seems to be a set of the same material as the one just now. As for the colorful yarn on it, it is even more precious. Although the neckline is so small, the palace doesn't get much colorful yarn. It's good enough to take out such a little. Duke Xing's mansion is really willing to spend a lot of money. Grandma, what do you think? Xiao Wanru nodded. She confirmed that the colorful yarn was Xiao Yanru's doing. I'll take the clothes for you and throw them back to the old woman directly. Let her see what kind of person the granddaughter she has raised for more than 10 years is. Rui and Great Elder Princess stood up and was about to leave. Chapter 498. What did you find? Chu Luqian stood in front of the window with his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes were calm and gentle. The morning sun was not very hot, and it slanted in through the window. This was a good position. The extra floor of the dark tower could not be seen from the outside. The slanted eaves created an illusion of the view from the outside. The extra floor could not be seen from the outside, but the inside could see everything clearly. Nothing was found. They said that there was no shortage of people. The palace sent someone to check secretly again. Xiao Xuanzi reported respectfully, and then presented a confidential document. Chu Luqian took it and casually flipped through it. It was a list of the former emperor's concubines who were locked up in the high wall. Several high-ranking concubines were accompanied by servants, and the low-ranking concubines were alone. His eyes fell on a few names at the bottom of the list. He turned back and put the confidential document on the desk. He picked up the pen in his hand and casually scratched it twice. Then he stretched out his slender fingers and knocked on the table twice. He pointed at the confidential document with his chin and said, "Just these few." "Yes, master. I'll do it now." Xiao Xuanzi took 2 steps forward, picked up the confidential document and put it in his sleeve. When he was about to leave, he suddenly said, "Master, the palace said that they want to see you." He pointed out of the window, which was the range of the palace. "I'm sick and don't want to see them." Chu Luqian said coldly. "Master, what about the soup?" Xiao Xuanzi hesitated for a moment. This happened almost all the time. He also knew that his master was missing, but as a servant, he still had to report this kind of thing. According to the past practice, pour it. Chu Luqian sat on the chair and picked up a booklet to read. His face, which was as gentle as jade, was indifferent. Even though he said so, he only looked a little colder. But Xiao Xuanzi knew that it was not just a little coldness that could be seen. He originally wanted to persuade him, but when he saw Chu Luqian's face, he covered his mouth and left helplessly. He really didn't know how to persuade him about this kind of thing. Standing at the foot of the pavilion, he turned around and walked towards the side door connected to the palace gate. At the side door, a beautiful palace maid was waiting there with a food basket. Seeing Xiao Xuanzi coming over, she hurried forward and said, "What did your highness say?" "You'd better take it back. His highness means that if you take it in, it will be thrown out." Xiao Xuanzi looked at the palace maid and said helplessly. The palace maid's face darkened, and the basket in her hand fell down powerlessly. But she still picked up the basket and handed it to Xiao Xuanzi. She said in a choked voice, "I made it myself. I got up early in the morning and made it myself. If you don't like it, just pour it out. But at least I brought it over and told His Highness." After the maid finished speaking, she wiped her tears and turned to leave. Xiao Xuanzi looked at her back and then at the food basket in his hand. He shook his head helplessly and went back with the food basket. His Highness said to throw it away as usual. After that, he had to deal with the affairs. He didn't expect that there would be such a thing in the Yuhui nunnery. He was afraid that he had to rearrange the things in His Highness's place. Besides, he had to find a more suitable place to send the things to the fifth miss. Why is it such an old lock? Xiao Wanru looked at the lock that had been closed and hung on it in astonishment. Not only the lock, but also the chain was very old, and there was even some rust in some places. There was not much rust, but there were some interlaced places. But the more it was like this, the more people felt that it was an old lock. It was more suitable and similar to the one found by Rui, and Great Elder Princess. This lock is more like a lock from 2 or 3 years ago. Yujia looked up and down at the lock and then looked at the one brought by Great Elder Princess in the corner. She immediately made a judgment. Compared with the one brought by Great Elder Princess, this lock was more like a lock from 2 or 3 years ago, but it was not particularly rusty. Of the 2 locks brought by Great Elder Princess, one was full of rust, and the other was just a little old, but it didn't seem to be obvious enough. The one Chu Luqian took coincided with what Xiao Wanru wanted. Send the rusty one to Grandma, and keep the other one and throw it into an empty corner in the back mountain with the previous one. Xiao Wanru was very satisfied with the comparison and said, "Miss, why don't you send both of them back to Great Elder Princess?" Yujia asked in confusion. "Send both of them back. After the incident, Grandma will still ask where this lock came from." Xiao Wanru smiled and said meaningfully. Yujia rolled her eyes and understood. She immediately picked up the most rusty one and said, "Miss, I will ask the servants of Great Elder Princess's mansion to take this one away and leave the other one. Great Elder Princess left Yuhui nunnery yesterday, and the lock was sent here with gifts by her servants today." The servants of Great Elder Princess's mansion were still waiting outside. If Xiao Wanru felt that it was not good, Great Elder Princess would certainly ask her to find another suitable one. "Go ahead." Xiao Wanru nodded and said. Yujia took the lock and went out. After a while, she came in with a frown and said, "Miss, old madam sent a Buddhist gift to Yuhui nunnery and asked you to take care of it these days." The so-called Buddhist gift was some offerings at home, which had to be placed for a certain number of days. If the host family took care of them and lit the incense and candles by themselves every day, it would be more sincere and effective than those offered by the nunnery. As soon as her grandma left, someone from Duke Xing's mansion came. They were really in a hurry. No one else from the mansion came. Xiao Wanru slightly raised the corners of her mouth with a hint of sarcasm in her beautiful eyes. It was said that the first miss wanted to take care of it, but she couldn't come for the time being because of something. Old madam made a wish in front of the Buddha before, and offering the Buddhist gift is also to fulfill the wish. It happens that you are on the mountain, so she didn't ask anyone else to come. After a period of time, old madam will go up the mountain in person to return the wish. Yujie said. "Bring her in." Xiao Wanru thought for a moment and said. Yujie nodded and went down. After a while, she came in with an old maid. After entering the door, she first bowed to Xiao Wanru with a smile, and then raised her head to look at the fifth Mississippi immediately. She was amazed. All the people in Duke Xing's mansion knew that their first miss was the most beautiful and had always been proud of her. But when she saw the fifth miss in front of her clearly, she immediately felt that the first miss was far inferior to her. Seeing that the old maid was staring at her miss in a daze, Yujie coughed unhappily. Xiao Wanru also looked at the old maid and found that she had never seen her before, so she asked lightly, "Are you sent up the mountain by old madam's side?" The old maid was startled by Yujie and hurriedly came to her senses. Hearing Xiao Wanru's question, she hurriedly said with a smile, "Old madam means that since the fifth miss is on the mountain, she won't ask anyone else to come. Originally, this wish is also for the sake of the heir and infanta." When it came to her father and mother, Xiao Wanru had to agree. With a trace of darkness in her watery eyes, she asked, "In front of which Buddha?" "In the most famous Buddha hall in the Yuhui nunnery." "Fifth miss, you only need to go there and burn an incense stick in the morning and evening," the old maid answered. There were many Buddha halls in the Yuhui nunnery, but the most famous one, or the one that the madams of aristocratic families in the capital thought was the most efficacious, was not the biggest one, but a medium-sized one. Coincidentally, it was the one where Xiao Wanru tore apart Huiqing's true face 2 years ago. At that time, the religious ceremony in Prime Minister Zhang's mansion was held there. "Do you want to hold a religious ceremony?" Xiao Wanru nodded. "Yes. When old madam gets better in a few days, she will bring people from the mansion to hold a religious ceremony," the old maid replied after a pause. "This matter hasn't been decided in the mansion?" Xiao Wanru keenly noticed the old maid's delay and asked. "Old madam means, basically, it has been decided that she will come, but it is not sure whether the other madams and misses in the mansion will come or not." The old maid did not expect the fifth miss to be so sensitive, so she could only say it bluntly. The third madam said that she was not in good health and could not come, and the 2 misses of the third branch did not intend to come with the excuse of taking care of their mother. Old madam and madam intended to hold a grand and beautiful ceremony to attract the attention of the whole capital city. But after the third branch made such a fuss, the ceremony seemed a little unharmonious. The third branch was originally weak in Duke Xing's mansion, but 2 years ago, the third madam suddenly became strong and dared to go against madam in some things. In this case, madam would give in to the third madam, and sometimes even old madam turned a blind eye to it. The servants in the mansion were the best at observing the situation. Once they found that the third branch became strong, they immediately did not dare to ignore the third branch openly or secretly. "Is there anything that is not sure?" Looking at the old maid's look, Xiao Wanru knew that there was something wrong and continued to ask. "Well, I am afraid that the third madam is not in good health. It depends on the situation." The old maid was embarrassed, but she had to say it. "Is the third aunt not in good health?" Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. She had already understood the reason and smiled slightly. It seemed that the third madam was not stupid. She used some clues left by Qin Yuru at that time and got some evidence against Madam of Duke Xing. It took not only courage but also confidence to say, no, when old madam wanted to burn incense to repay the vow. If she did not have the confidence, she must have evidence against Madam of Duke Xing. Since the car accident, the third madam has not fully recovered. She gets sick from time to time. Old madam and second madam are very anxious and have seen many doctors, but there has been no cure. The old maid sighed and hurriedly explained. It was madam who asked her to say so. Xiao Wanru nodded and didn't ask more questions this time. She just looked at Yujie beside her. Yujie understood and took the old maid away. After asking the old maid some details, she came back to report to Xiao Wanru. Then she let the old maid take people to decorate the Buddha hall. "Miss, I have asked. It is said that Pushun Nun is in charge of old madam's religious ceremony this time." After the old maid left, Yujie came in and reported. "Isn't Pushun Nun devoted to Buddhism and doesn't even go out of the meditation room in the past?" Xiao Wanru narrowed her watery eyes and said. This matter was getting more and more interesting. I also felt strange. I asked the old maid and she said it was for the sake of the first miss, Yujie reported. Chapter 499. Having been in the Yuhui nunnery for so long, Xiao Wanru had never met this Pushun nun. On the one hand, it was because this nun basically did not accept this kind of religious rites and only focused on practicing Buddhism. She seldom went out. On the other hand, Xiao Wanru was not a layman and basically stayed in the back of the Yuhui nunnery. That part of the area was also off limits to most pilgrims. Since Pushun nun had accepted this task, she must be present on the first day of offering to the Buddha. When Xiao Wanru arrived at the Buddha hall, the maids and old maids of Duke Xing's mansion were busy. There were 7 or 8 of them. When they saw Xiao Wanru, they were stunned for a moment. After hearing Yujie say that she was the 5th miss, they all stepped back obediently. The 5th miss had no parents in the mansion and was not loved by Madame Dowager. However, the 5th miss had a noble grandmother, who would not watch the 5th miss being bullied. If she made trouble, Madame Dowager would not be able to bear it. Xiao Wanru entered the main hall with Yujie and saw Pushun nun in the main hall. Pushun nun looked about 40 or 50 years old. She was very beautiful and had the same gentle aura as Xiao Wanru. Even though she was dressed in black, she also had a kind of softness that had been solidified by time, which made people feel very comfortable. Her beautiful hair had been shaved, but even so, this Master Pu Shan still gave Xiao Wanru a different feeling from other nuns. The wrinkles at the corners of her eyes showed that she used to be beautiful. Not only her appearance, but if she was placed in a group of nuns, people could see her at a glance. Even if she stood with Mingqiu nun, who had an outstanding appearance, people would not be surprised. Ignore her existence. As a young lady of an aristocratic family, she had no choice but to enter a nunnery because of the decline of her family, but her temperament was still outstanding. Anyone who saw her would have to praise this Pushun nun. She was indeed a lady from a century-old family. Hui Qing, who was standing beside Pushun nun, had already seen Xiao Wanru. She was stunned at first, and then hurriedly whispered something to Pushun nun, who had her eyes closed. Pushun nun nodded slightly, opened her eyes, and looked at Xiao Wanru calmly. "I have to trouble you this time, Master Pu Shan." Xiao Wanru came over and bowed to her with a smile. Her watery eyes were extremely bright, and she bowed sideways. Pushun nun smiled slightly and bowed to her, "5th Miss Xiao, you." Then, he closed his eyes again and lowered his head. The prayer beads slowly slid across his hand as he continued to recite the scriptures. "5th Miss Xiao, if you have anything to say, you can tell me. My master usually doesn't interfere in matters." Hui Ming, who was beside Xiao Wanru, said with a kind smile. Nun said. Hui Qing of Pushun nun and began. Nun nua nun nun long. Nun long, nun 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 and came. When did they come? Xiao Wanru asked in a low voice. Master will bring us here every day, but we don't know when exactly. Hui Ming said with a smile. Hand, nun pus, noa, Xiao Wanru said and walked to the Buddha statue in the middle. Hui Ming put her palms together slightly and followed her. She said with a smile, 5th Miss Xiao, if you think that the arrangement is inappropriate, you can rearrange it after telling me. Is there a different arrangement? Xiao Wanru looked curiously at the arrangement of the maids and old maids. Most of them were pastries and fruits, and some were offerings of materials. Then there were some small houses, pavilions, and other objects. Each piece was exquisitely crafted and placed according to a certain standard. Yes, it's different. The previous arrangement was chosen by 1st Miss at will. But if you are not satisfied, you can choose another arrangement. Hui Ming took out a book-like thing from behind the Buddha statue. When she opened it, she could see the different arrangements of the offerings. There were also special names of the offerings. They were all very good names. Xiao Wanru looked at the top. It was indeed the pattern that was placed now. It was also the simplest one. It could be seen that Xiao Yenru had pointed it out casually. What surprised Xiao Wanru the most was that these paintings were extremely excellent and could even be said to be perfect. When the 1st Miss Xiao came to see the 5th Miss last time, she also visited the master by the way. At that time, she mentioned this matter. The master asked me to show this album to the first Mississippi. The first miss didn't look at it carefully and just pointed out the plate presentation method on it. At that time, she also said that if the fifth miss was not satisfied, she could choose another one. Hui Ming explained with a smile. Xiao Wanru flipped through a few more. As expected, each of the following ones was more exquisite and better arranged than the one on the top. They immediately made the one on the top look inferior. It was obvious who was better. Xiao Wanru flipped through a few more and finally chose the best one among them. This one was obviously the best arranged one, and the lipstick was 10 Blessings and Wishes. Hui Ming had been following her. Seeing that she flipped through this one again, she knew that she was very satisfied with it. She immediately said with a smile, "Fifth miss, you have a good eye. This one is indeed the best. If fifth miss chooses this one, I will arrange it. There are many people in your mansion, so it will be very fast to rearrange it. It's almost done. If you rearrange it, I'm afraid it's not good." Xiao Wanru looked up at the offerings that had been placed more than half. "Fifth miss, you're too polite. It's originally a matter of our nunnery. We have to satisfy fifth Mississippi. I heard that this time it's because of fifth miss's parents. If fifth miss changes, it's reasonable. Outsiders will only say that fifth miss is filial, cautious, and attentive to her parents." Hui Ming said with a smile. Her attitude was very kind. She felt the same as when she first met Pushun Nun. No one could find any bad in her. Forget it. It's chosen by Big Sister, and it has been placed. Xiao Wanru shook her hand and returned the album to Hui Ming. "Fifth miss, it's really not troublesome, but if fifth miss insists, then forget it. If fifth miss feels that it's not suitable after a few days, you can tell this poor nun. This poor nun will definitely get someone to rearrange it." Hui Ming seemed to want to persuade her, but after saying a few words, she changed her mind. Yu Jie followed Xiao Wanru and looked Hui Ming up and down. This Hui Ming nun gave people a really good feeling. She was not only kind, but also gentle. It seemed that no matter what Xiao Wanru asked or wanted to do, she would do as Xiao Wanru said and didn't force her at all. She was more slick than Puyu Nun, who was the reception monk. Of course, the reception monk in Jingxin Monastery in the past couldn't even be compared with her. "Thank you, Hui Ming Nun." Xiao Wanru smiled and nodded. "If fifth miss has nothing else to do, I will accompany my master to chant scriptures." Hui Ming put the album in her hand behind the Buddha statue and said with a smile. "Nun, please help yourself." Xiao Wanru nodded. Hui Ming returned to Pushun Nun, closed her eyes, and chanted scriptures with Pushun Nun again with a peaceful face. However, Hui Qing, who had sat down before, seemed to be a little uneasy. She twisted her body slightly, opened her eyes to look at the Buddha beads in her hand, turned a few beads, and closed her eyes again. Xiao Wanru walked around the main hall and then went to the side hall. The arrangement of the side hall was very similar to the arrangement of the religious ceremony in Prime Minister Zhang's mansion. The side hall on one side was a place for the master to rest, and the tables and chairs were placed in a very standard way. The other side was an empty place. If the master needed sundries, he could put them in this side hall. The Buddhist offerings brought by Duke Xing's mansion were basically taken out and placed here. They brought a lot of things, but they were not completely placed until now. Some servant girls cleaned them up, and some old maids carefully took them to the main hall. It was a mess. When the servant girls and old maids saw Xiao Wanru coming over, they all put down the things in their hands and bowed together. Xiao Wanru waved her hand and motioned for them to do as they pleased. Then she walked over and looked at the offerings casually. There were really a lot of offerings, which had not been sorted out and were piled up in a mess. Xiao Wanru's eyes suddenly fell on a few pairs of bracelets. They were silver bracelets. They were very exquisite patterns of the same thickness. Upon a closer look, even the patterns were made of thunder. There were 8 pairs in total. The silver bracelets looked a little fat, but the rings were not big. They looked like children's bracelets and were a little old. What are these? Seeing Xiao Wanru notice the 8 pairs of bracelets, Yujie pulled the old maid who had gone to report to Xiao Wanru and asked. These are the bracelets that the misses and childs wore when they were young. Old Madam also thought that they should be worshipped together. The old maid tilted her head to look at them and answered with a smile. Won't they be taken back later? Xiao Wanru looked at the exquisite and beautiful paper pavilion in front of her and asked curiously. These paper pavilions and things like that were going to be burned. The old maid explained with a smile, of course not. This is to get a good reputation. On the other hand, it is to bless the misses and childs to be safe and smooth. The old maid reached out to pick up a pair of small silver bracelets and said, this pair belongs to the first miss, so it was placed in the first position. Look, there is a small character on it, which is the first miss's name. Yujie took it and handed it to Xiao Wanru. As expected, there was a small character, Ru, on the side of the bracelet, which was worn by Xiao Yanru when she was young. Putting down the pair of bracelets, Xiao Wanru picked up another pair with interest and asked, are these my bracelets? But I have never worn them since I was born. Do they also belong to the 5th miss? The old maid looked at the pair of bracelets in Xiao Wanru's hands and said hurriedly, the 5th miss does have a bracelet. When Master Hao was born, old Madam remade everything. This pair of bracelets was prepared by old Madam long ago. Now it happens to belong to the 5th Mississippi. The old maid looked at the pair of bracelets in Xiao Wanru's hands and said hurriedly, they match the 5th Miss's bracelets quite well. They were both sent to her, and the other was still in old Madam's hands. She reached out to take another bracelet of Xiao Yanru's and put it together with her own bracelet. They were exactly the same, as if they were made in the same mold. No matter the pattern or the style, there was no bias at all. She also noticed that the character, Ru, in her name was newly engraved. Chapter 500. After that, Xiao Wanru casually flipped through some objects to be offered. In fact, some pastries and so on could not be offered for a long time and had to be replaced every 2 days. Because the pastries had been offered in front of the Buddha, they were considered to be blessed. After people from the mansion came to replace the new pastries, they would take the old ones back and distribute them to the people in the mansion. As for the pavilions and other objects made of paper, they would be burned after the religious ceremony. Those light-colored clothes would be donated to the nuns of the Yuhui nunnery. There were also some gold and silver jewelry with good luck and evil spirits, like these pairs of silver bracelets. Naturally, they would be taken back. Even though these childs and misses could not wear them now, they could still be kept at the bottom of the box. In the future, they could be passed on to their children to wear, which was very blessed. Seeing that Xiao Wanru was really curious, from time to time picked up one and touched another to ask about it, the smile on the old maid's face also became vivid. The sweat on her face had already dried up, and she followed Xiao Wanru attentively and eagerly. After accompanying Xiao Wanru around for about 2 hours, the Buddha hall was almost full. Pushun Nun and her 2 disciples, Hui Qing and Hui Ming, had left at some point. Xiao Wanru asked the old maid to go about her business, and she took Yujie around casually. A servant girl moved a few things around. It seemed that she could not move them properly for a while, so a little nun of the nunnery came over to help her move them. The things around them were a little crowded, so they did not notice that there was a plate of pastries on the side. With a clang, the plate of pastries fell heavily to the ground. The plate with pastries fell to pieces. The servant girl and the nun were startled and stepped back again. Then they knocked over several things. Fortunately, these things were not porcelain. Hey, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you keep an eye on them? Look, they fell. The old maid in charge rushed over in a hurry and said angrily as she asked someone to clean them up. The servant girl was startled and looked at Xiao Wanru timidly. Seeing that Xiao Wanru did not notice her, she breathed a sigh of relief. Nanny, I will be careful next. Be careful next time. Look at what you've done. Get out, go to the door and kneel for 2 hours. The old maid in charge said angrily. The servant girl did not dare to talk back. She put down the things in her hands, walked to the door of the main hall, and was about to kneel down. Kneel to the side. What's the point of kneeling at the door? The supervisor said angrily again. The maid wiped her tears and knelt to the side. Although the nun of the Yuhui nunnery was young, she seemed to be smart. She hurriedly took 2 steps back. Seeing that the old maid in charge didn't notice her, she turned around and ran away. She was not a servant of Duke Xing's mansion, so the supervisor old maid could not punish her, so she just turned a blind eye to it. Fifth miss, please step aside. Look at this girl. She's so careless that she's brought all these things out. Even Buddha will blame her. The old maid in charge came over and bowed to Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru obeyed and stepped back, but asked Yujie to fetch something. The collision just now had knocked out the picture album that Hui Ming had shown her before. She picked up the picture album, stood aside, and looked at it carefully. The old maid carefully asked a group of servant girls and old maids to clean up the things that had been broken just now, and then left with others. The hall immediately quieted down. Miss, do you want to put it in another way? Seeing that Xiao Wanru was looking at it seriously, Yujie immediately looked at the door and asked curiously. Was there so much care in the arrangement of Jingxin nunnery in the past? Xiao Wanru squinted at Yujie. Yujie thought for a moment and shook her head honestly. Maybe the nunnery in the capital city is much more careful than that in our Jingxin nunnery. The arrangement in our nunnery is random. Not to mention that there are no picture albums. Even if there are not so many details. As Yujie said, she reached out to pinch the picture album and muttered to herself, it must have cost a lot of money to make such a picture album. Shouldn't such a good picture album be in the hands of the abbess or the reception monk? No matter what, when Pushun Nun left just now, she should have taken the picture album with her. Xiao Wanru's hand paused. She suddenly raised her head from the picture album she was reading carefully and reached out to touch the material of the picture album. She was good at painting in her last life and in this life. She had always studied painting paper, so how could she not feel that the quality of the paper was excellent? Just now, she was still thinking that the picture album was so vivid. Now she knew that, on the one hand, the painter had a good foundation, and on the other hand, the material used for the painting was very good. Not only the paper was very good, but also the ink used was the best ink. Was the Yuhui nunnery in the capital city so rich now? Even if it was, it couldn't be so luxurious outside. Everything in the Yuhui nunnery was very gorgeous, but it also followed the standard of the nunnery in the past. This picture album was completely different from the style of the whole Yuhui nunnery in the past. She put it in front of her nose and smelled it. There was a smell of ink. Obviously, it was made not long ago. Could it be that it was just made and happened to be used in her mansion, so Pushun Nun specially took it out and used it? If Jingxin nunnery wants to make a thing, and this thing is more gorgeous, do you think it will be used by itself? Xiao Wanru pinched the picture album in her hand, and her watery eyes became serious with a trace of coldness. There was something wrong with this picture album. How could it be used by itself? Even if it is a small Buddha statue, like a consecrated Buddha statue with golden light, it is either requested by pilgrims or given to distinguished guests. It is impossible for it to be used by itself. Yujie shook her head repeatedly. She had been in Jingxin nunnery for a long time and saw a lot of things, but she had never seen her family use expensive and gorgeous things. Well, do you think this thing is for me to look through at will? Xiao Wanru lowered her head again, and the coldness in her eyes disappeared in a flash. The gorgeous picture album, the exquisite brush and ink, both the technique and the material were excellent. But now it was thrown here so casually, and it happened to come out. How could she not take it out and look through it again when she saw such a picture album just now when she couldn't see it clearly or was hesitant in her heart? Miss, put it away quickly. Yujie said anxiously with sweat on her forehead. She understood what Xiao Wanru meant. It's too late. Xiao Wanru said in a soft voice with a trace of coquettishness. Her eyes fell on the picture album in front of her, which was 10 Blessings as One Wishes, which she had looked through over and over again just now. There were a few obvious stains on it, but there were definitely no stains when she looked through it just now. Dirty, dirty. When did it happen? Yujia looked at the dirty red stains in astonishment and stuttered all of a sudden. She also saw her master look at it just now, but there were indeed no stains on it. When did the stains appear? She looked up at Xiao Wanru's body and found that there were no stains on her face. Then where did these stains come from? If the stains were there just now, she would definitely be able to see them clearly. Xiao Wanru picked up the picture album and brought it to her nose. Except for the smell of paint, there was no other smell in it, but it was in line with her guess. She blinked her watery eyes slightly, and the color in them became more and more intense. This picture album was indeed prepared for her. Let's go out and have a look. Xiao Wanru closed the picture album and said casually. Then she turned around and walked out. Miss, please leave the picture album here first, otherwise others will misunderstand. Yujie was extremely anxious. Even if I put it back now, there will still be many people who will accuse me of ruining the picture album. Just now, many people saw me pick it up and look at it, and some of them deliberately walked past me to take a look. They must have seen that the picture album is clean, Xiao Wanru said as she walked. This matter would not be over. She would like to see what they were up to and what Duke Xing's mansion wanted to do. Seeing her extremely peaceful look, Yujie was flustered, but she still breathed a sigh of relief. Her master should have a way. That was great. Although Xiao Wanru was young, Yujie had been with her for a long time, so she admired her more and more. As long as it was Xiao Wanru's order, even if Yujie did not understand it at the moment, she would do her best without hesitation. The master and the servant walked out of the main hall unhurriedly one after the other. They saw a group of people gathered outside the hall. They were not from Duke Ying's mansion, but most of them were pilgrims who came to the Yuhui nunnery. They gathered there and chattered about something. Yujie could not hear clearly from a distance, but she could only hear someone saying, "Poor girl. This is still in front of the Buddha hall. How can they punish her like this? Aren't they afraid of retribution? Yes, this little girl is so pitiful. She was punished to kneel here at such a young age. If her family could survive, who would be willing to send their children to this family?" Of course, the meaning of their words was not good. Yujie suddenly had a bad feeling. She pointed at the crowd and then at the Buddha hall and stammered in horror, Could this be the servant girl who broke things inside? Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on the crowd. From her position, she could not see clearly who was in the crowd. But when Yujie asked, she nodded with a cold smile and confirmed, it must be that servant girl. Why should I do that? It was obviously the old maid who punished her. Why did she leave her here? It seems that it was you who punished her. Yujie pointed outside and then inside. After thinking it through, she flew into a rage. Why? Just because I'm the master here, and the only master at that. Shouldn't I be the one to take responsibility if something happens to my servants? Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and walked out. Miss, wait a minute. Put on a veil. Yujie took out a veil from her sleeve. Xiao Wanru stood still, and Yujie skillfully put on the veil for her. There was a picture book and a servant girl. What would they do next? Or in other words, there was also a silver bracelet, a longevity lock, and even a set of locked clothes. Chapter 501. In the crowd, the kneeling servant girl was in a sorry state, sobbing. There was a palm print on her face, and half of her face was red and swollen. Compared with the other side of her face, it was very obvious. What's wrong with you? I asked you, but you didn't answer. Which family are you from? Who hit you? This is the Yuhui nunnery, and not anyone's mansion can punish you as they like. You are really a sinner. You are so arrogant outside. What can you do in the mansion? Which mansion is she from? Some people were asking, some were sighing, and some were asking each other. It was really hard to tell which mansion a servant girl was from. No matter what they said or asked, the servant girl didn't say a word and still knelt there in tears. Outside the crowd, Xiao Wanru's watery eyes turned and fell on the kneeling servant girl. She was indeed the servant girl who had been punished to kneel before, but she didn't know who had slapped her face. She walked over slowly, stood in front of the servant girl, looked at her face, and squatted down to look at her eyes carefully. The servant girl's eyes were red and swollen from crying. She looked at Xiao Wanru in front of her blankly, a little confused and at a loss. "Hey, why are you crying here? What happened?" Yujie's voice came from behind her with a little surprise. The servant girl turned around and immediately recognized Yujie. She turned to Yujie and said, "Sister Yujie, fifth miss." Fifth miss. Speaking of this, she immediately burst into tears. Behind her, Xiao Wanru stood up straight and looked at the servant girl's back indifferently. Her words sounded really vague. She was accusing her. "What happened to our miss? Who slapped you? Why are you still here?" Yujie looked her up and down with a surprised look on her face. "Fifth miss. Fifth miss." The servant girl seemed to want to say something, but her voice was choked and she couldn't say a word clearly. Apart from the fifth miss, there was only the sound of crying. "What did our miss do to you? Tell me. You won't say that it was our miss who slapped you, will you?" Yujie asked impatiently. The servant girl shook her hand vigorously and continued to cry, but she did not say a word. Her eyes were panicked and her body trembled slightly. It seemed that she was very frightened. He was frightened by the fifth miss mentioned by Yujie. Which family's fifth miss is it? Which mansion is he from? Look at this pitiful man, he's really frightened. Even if it was really the fifth miss who did it, this girl wouldn't dare to say it. The crowd began to talk about it again with different opinions. In conclusion, it was Xiao Wanru, the fifth miss, who did it. Yujie squatted in front of the servant girl and reached out to touch the servant girl's face. "I didn't hit you, did I?" The handprint on the maid's face was still very obvious. Yujie's hand was relatively small, so it could be seen clearly that the handprint was not hers. Bigger than her hand. The maid shook her head hard this time and said in a panic, "It's not you. Sister Yujie, it's not you." Yujie breathed a sigh of relief. "It's good that it's not me. Otherwise, I won't be able to explain it clearly later. Since it's not me, who is it? You tell me. I'll ask my miss to make the decision for you. Although we don't know the people in the mansion today and we don't know who hit you, we can always report it to old madam of the mansion." Yujie said angrily. "No, don't." The servant girl burst into tears. "Why not? Are you afraid that someone will take revenge on you?" Yujie frowned in confusion. "Benefactor, are you from Duke Xing's mansion?" A gentle voice suddenly came from outside the crowd. The crowd looked back and found that it was a nun from the Yuhui nunnery. The crowd made way for her. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on the nun with deep eyes. She didn't expect that the nun still had a backup plan. The nun walked up to the servant girl, looked at the Buddha hall not far away, and then looked at the servant girl. She asked gently again, "Are you from Duke Xing's mansion, the servant girl who accompanied the fifth miss of your mansion to do the religious ceremony just now?" The servant girl nodded hard while crying. There was another wave in the crowd immediately. Because of Yujie's words, they felt that the fifth miss was unlikely to do it again. The fifth miss was the one who really did it. "Nun, what you said is so unreasonable. Our miss doesn't know any other servants in Duke Xing's mansion. Just now, she just accompanied and watched. It was the supervisor of Duke Xing's mansion who was in charge of the whole process. How can you say that she accompanied our miss to do the religious ceremony?" Yujie looked at the nun with a sneer. She didn't know this nun. The Yuhui nunnery was very big and there were many nuns. It was normal that she didn't know this nun. Benefactor, I made a slip of the tongue. The nun said to Yujie calmly and modestly. Yujie ignored her, gave the handkerchief in her hand to the servant girl, and then pulled her up. The servant girl originally wanted to struggle and not get up, but Yujie was strong. She dragged her up with one hand and said, if you have something to say, stand up and say it. Don't cry like this. Just tell me who beat you. The servant girl stood up and looked around in panic. There were many concerned faces on her left and right, and there was also a face with a veil. She didn't know any of them. Just say it. So many of us are listening. This is not Duke Xing's mansion. You can't be arrogant and domineering here. Yes, yes, and where is the original nun of the nunnery? Perhaps the words of the crowd moved the servant girl and gave her some courage. She wiped her tears and said timidly, Fifth miss, you mean our miss beat you? Yujie immediately raised her voice and said loudly. Seeing that the servant girl was still crying, she said, don't talk. Just nod or shake your head. Everyone quieted down and looked at the servant girl's head. Seeing that she nodded imperceptibly after hesitation, they immediately became excited. As expected, it's the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion. She seems to be a ruthless person. Of course. She asked someone to kneel in front of the Buddha hall as a punishment. This is the Yuhui nunnery. Which miss with good etiquette would do such a thing? That's right. I don't know what kind of vicious person the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion is. Isn't she afraid of offending Bodhisattva and making her suffer? Immediately, a few people put their palms together in panic and were about to bow to the Buddha hall from a distance, looking nervous and scared. The nun also put her palms together and chanted the name of Buddha in the direction of the Buddha hall in a low voice. There was some commotion in the crowd. Even the nun of the Yuhui nunnery did this. They were afraid that Buddha would really punish them. Most of the people in the Yuhui nunnery came to worship Buddha, so they naturally believed in this kind of thing. With their faces slightly pale, they followed the nun to chant the name of Buddha. Well, this matter is over. Go back to where you came from. Buddha can see all living beings. After chanting the name of Buddha, the nun said gently. Thank you, nun. The servant girl wiped her face and was about to leave with a limp. Xiao Wanru winked at Yujie. It was really hard to explain if she asked the servant girl to leave at this time. Hey, don't go. You said that it was our miss who hit you. Why did she hit you? Our miss has been in the Buddha hall all the time just now. When did she hit you? Since you said that it was our miss who hit you, you have to make it clear. Are you trying to blame our miss for being so ambiguous? Yujie reached out to hold the servant girl and shouted loudly. Her loud and confident look attracted many people's attention. Just now you said that it was our miss who hit you, but you don't even know our Mississippi. How could it be our miss who hit you? Our miss has been living in the Yuhui nunnery all the time. Today, only I came out as a servant girl. You and other people came here to set up the table today. Our miss and I just watched from the side. How could you blame our miss for what happened? Yujie became louder and louder, saying one sentence after another, since the slap on your face was not made by me, it must be made by our miss, right? Except for me, our miss can't order you around. Now I'm going to ask miss to come over and compare the palm print to see if it is made by Mississippi. As Yujie spoke, she turned around and was about to leave. The servant girl was so anxious and hurriedly reached out to hold her. What are you doing? Your face is so swollen. If it gets swollen for a while, I won't be able to see the palm print clearly. If we go there late, it will be even more difficult to explain. Yujie pushed away the servant girl's hand and said angrily. The servant girl cried and pulled her hand with a face full of panic and fear. It was hard to tell whether it was because of a guilty conscience or because of real fear. Was the palm print on your face made by your fifth miss? Xiao Wanru said lightly. The servant girl nodded at first, and then shook her head. She still didn't say a word, but tears fell down in pairs, looking extremely pitiful. "Do you know me?" Xiao Wanru asked gently. The servant girl shook her head hard. There were strangers around her, but she remembered Yujie's face very clearly. Her tears blurred her vision. "Since you don't know me, why do you keep hinting that I hit you?" Xiao Wanru's eyes became more and more indifferent. Yujie came over, bowed to Xiao Wanru respectfully, and said, "Miss." For a moment, everyone was shocked and looked at Xiao Wanru in front of her in astonishment. She had been here for a while and had met the servant girl's eyes during this period. The servant girl obviously didn't know her, but the servant girl in front of them was the fifth miss mentioned by the servant girl just now. The meaning of this was enough to make many people wake up at once. Slander. It's actually a servant who slandered her master. How dare a servant slander her master? There must be someone behind her. I remember. Isn't the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion the miss who was recognized and returned to her family a few years ago? It is said that the whole Duke Xing's mansion doesn't like her, and she was forced to enter the Yuhui nunnery to observe mourning for her parents for 3 years. Someone connected the dots and came to such a conclusion. Suddenly, this buried old matter was dug up. Yujie, send someone to send her to old madam and ask her who wants to hurt me this time. Xiao Wanru said with tired eyes. Although only a pair of cold and charming watery eyes could be seen, there was no doubt that she was sad. After saying that, she turned around and was about to leave without looking at the crowd. Fifth miss. Fifth miss, you didn't hit me. It was the supervisor nanny who punished me just now. The servant girl finally said a complete sentence and knelt down heavily in front of Xiao Wanru's back. Chapter 502. Yujie took a step forward and stood in front of Xiao Wanru. She glared at the servant girl angrily and said, "Then why didn't you make it clear just now? You just kept crying when I asked you. You said that our miss was hiding something. What would others think of our miss? I just wanted to ask the fifth miss to plead for mercy from the nanny in charge." The servant girl burst into tears and said anxiously. Xiao Wanru lowered her watery eyes and looked at the servant girl silently. She didn't want to argue with her, so she waved her hand and said, "The old maid in charge has left. You can go back to the mansion first." Yes, I'll go back right away." The servant girl wiped her tears, stood up and left in a hurry. Even though she limped, she walked in a hurry, as if someone was chasing after her. Everyone present looked at the servant girl's back in astonishment and couldn't even say a word. It was obvious that there was something wrong with the servant girl. She had deliberately led others to suspect the fifth Mississippi. But in fact, she couldn't even recognize the fifth miss standing in front of her. How could the fifth miss be the one who punished her? She had been crying and couldn't explain it clearly before, but now she said it very smoothly. Not only was she very smooth, but she also ran away quickly. It was obvious that she had a guilty conscience. When everyone came to their senses, Xiao Wanru and her servant girl had already left. The onlookers were talking about it as they left. They all thought that the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion was a poor person. Not only did her parents die early, but even her relatives in the mansion treated her coldly because she had been living outside. She had been forced to hide in the Yuhui nunnery before, and now she was slandered by the servants in the mansion. No one knew whether old madam really didn't like this granddaughter or the current madam of Duke Xing did it. Although it was said that it was done in the name of old madam, it was said that the inner court of Duke Xing's mansion was in charge of madam of Duke Xing. If there was really a servant who wanted to frame the fifth miss, it was most likely to be madam of Duke Xing. She had no blood relationship with the fifth Miss Xiao, and it was faintly said that madam of Duke Xing hated the fifth Miss Xiao very much. There were different opinions about what happened 2 years ago. Now things had changed. At this time, more and more people began to talk about this matter, which was something that old madam didn't expect. Xiao Wanru returned to the silence room and looked at the picture album in her hand. There were thick stains on the picture album. Yujie had carefully wiped them with a handkerchief, but she still failed to wipe them off. Not only did she fail to wipe them off, but the colors on the picture album were also different because of Yujia's wiping, which made it even uglier. Miss, this mark wasn't there before. Why did it suddenly appear later? Yujia still didn't understand why such a phenomenon would appear. The originally clean album suddenly had a stain on it after being in the young Miss's hands for a while. She was sure that at that time, there was absolutely nothing spilled on the album. When the young Miss was looking at it, she could see it clearly from the side. Then where did this stain that appeared out of nowhere come from? Xiao Wanru reached out her finger and scratched the stain. She scraped off some color and put it in front of her nose. After taking a whiff, a glint flashed across his eyes. The color appeared out of nowhere. She really knew about it. The paint made of fengshao flower could not show its color for a while. After a period of time, it would show its previous color. Fengshao flower was tasteless, but the paint made of it must be bright. If no other color was added, the whole color would be bright but not very clean, just like the stain at present. This was told to her by the Buddhist of Weiyu Pavilion, who had taught her painting skills in her last life. However, in her memory, the appearance of the Buddhist of Weiyu Pavilion had always been a vague existence. She couldn't remember anything about him clearly, as if the memory about him had been blurred by clouds. This was also the reason why Xiao Wanru was anxious when she saw the signature of Buddhist of Weiyu Pavilion. Fengshao flower was not something that ordinary people could get. It was a good product for making some special pigments. If one didn't know much about painting, he wouldn't know about it at all. She reached out to pinch the paper of the picture album and said to Yujia, "Where is the new stack of painting paper sent last time? I'll look for it." Yujia stood up, walked to a corner of the silence room and rummaged through it. After a while, she came over with a stack of delicate paper and said, "Miss, is this the stack you want?" Xiao Wanru reached out to pinch it. Feeling the paper under her hand, she nodded. "Are these two kinds of paper the same?" Yujia somewhat understood what Xiao Wanru meant. She reached out to pinch it with both hands, and then frowned and said, "Miss, although these two kinds of paper feel good, they are obviously not the same kind of paper." "Even if they are not the same kind of paper, it doesn't matter." Xiao Wanru smiled, took a few pieces of paper and the picture album, and walked to the desk by the window. There were ink and various paints in front of the desk, which was originally the place where she painted. Xiao Wanru spread the paper on the table and looked at the stained paper again. Then she picked up the writing brush and began to write according to the words on it. The paintings in the picture album were very good, especially this one. It could be seen that a lot of thought had been put into it. Even if it was only this one, she could feel the proficiency and the superb skills of the painter. It was definitely not something that ordinary people could draw. Even if she went down the mountain to ask a painter to draw it, she might not be able to find one. However, the painting skills of Pushun Nun on the mountain must be good, and Xiao Yenru's painting skills at the foot of the mountain were also very good. However, what they didn't know was that Xiao Wanru's painting skills, which had been brought from the last life to the present, were also very good. If it weren't for her good painting skills, she wouldn't have become the painter of the beauties in the last life. Moreover, she was recognized by the beauties and many people came to ask her to draw a painting. During the consort selection of the beauties in the royal family, there would be portraits sent to the palace. It was said that some painters of the previous dynasty also received bribes. If they didn't draw well, they would even lose their lives in the end. After that, the painters of the previous dynasty tried to draw more realistically and clearly, which required high skills of the painters. The painting in the picture album was the same. After watching Xiao Wanru's painting for more than 2 years, Yujia, who didn't understand anything at all, became a little bit confused. She could also see that the painter of this picture album had an extraordinary foundation. Her eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's tender white face with some admiration. Her face was calm, her eyes were dark, her face was delicate and charming, and her cherry lips were slightly pursed. No matter from which aspect, it could be seen that Xiao Wanru was very attentive and worked very hard to draw this painting. Xiao Wanru only ate a little for lunch. After that, she didn't even take a nap and continued to draw. She didn't have much time, and those people wouldn't give her much time. Even though she had been making the best use of her time, she still drew until dinner time. For a few hours, she had been drawing non-stop. When she finished, she felt sore all over. Xiao Wanru put down the brush in her hand and waved her hand. Her eyes fell on the painting she had just finished and the painting in the picture album. The two paintings were almost identical, and even the angle of color treatment looked very similar. She took a deep breath of relief and ordered, "Go and ask Qing-er to come here." "Yes, I'll go and ask Qing-er to come here right away." Yujia nodded and called in Qing-er, who was squatting in the corridor outside and playing with nothing to do. She knew that this little girl called Qing-er was not as harmless as she appeared to be. How could the person sent by Prince Chun be really harmless? "Take this painting and this picture album away, ask someone to paste the painting and bind it into the album, and remove the damaged one," Xiao Wanru ordered. Yujia packed up all the things on the table, put them in a box, and then handed it to Qing-er. "Miss, when do you want it?" Qing-er took the box without any surprise and asked with a smile. She looked young and innocent with some baby fat on her face. "Tomorrow morning." Xiao Wanru thought for a while and said. She felt that they wouldn't give her much time to finish this picture album. "All right, miss, this servant will go down the mountain once." Qing nodded. Qing nodded and said with a smile. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and waved her hand. She knew that Qing-er could do it, or Chu Luchen, who was behind Qing-er, could do it. But she didn't need to ask about the details. "Be careful on the way." But she still specially reminded her. It was getting late, and the pilgrims who wanted to go down the mountain had already gone down the mountain. Those who stayed would not go down the mountain. The people who went down the mountain at this time were particularly conspicuous, especially the people around her. Fortunately, Qing-er was just a little servant girl, and she was an inferior servant girl. If it were Yujia, she would not be able to go down the mountain in any case. Moreover, Qing-er's servant girl was a pretentious one. Xiao Wanru was not anxious about whether she could go down the mountain or not. "Miss, don't worry. I know." Qing-er understood tacitly. She bowed to Xiao Wanru again, and then went out with the long box in her arms. Xiao Wanru had her own carriage on the mountain. The carriage had been parked in the parking lot of the Yuhui nunnery, and the coachman had a room on the side, which was also rented from the Yuhui nunnery. There was still a short distance from the gate of the Yuhui nunnery, so it couldn't be regarded as inside the Yuhui nunnery. When Xiao Wanru was on the mountain, the coachman usually lived in this room unless he had something to do. There were several rooms like this beside the parking lot. The coachmen who sent their masters to the Yuhui nunnery to worship Buddha often rested and drank tea in the empty room, waiting for their masters to come back after worshipping Buddha. Xiao Wanru had never gone down the mountain, but her servant girls went down the mountain from time to time. The carriage became their means of transportation. Seeing Qing-er coming out, the coachman of Duke Xing's mansion happened to see her. He came up to her with a smile and asked, "Miss Qing-er, what's the matter?" Great Elder Princess gave something to Fifth Miss before, and Fifth Miss also has something to give to Great Elder Princess. "I'll send it to her now. Please go down the mountain," Qing said with a smile. She looked young and innocent, which made people have a good impression on her. The coachman was in a dilemma. "What? Can't I? If it doesn't work, I'll borrow the carriage next to it." No matter which family it is, when we arrive at Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion, I will definitely thank them heavily. Qing-er rolled her eyes and pointed at the carriages parked on the side with a smile. Chapter 503. You don't need to borrow it. Miss Qing-er, it's just that the horse was not fed well yesterday, so it is not in good spirits today. It may take a little longer to go down the mountain. The coachman looked at the carriages on the side, immediately smiled and explained. While explaining, he harnessed the horse and said attentively, Miss Ching, although it is a little slow, I will never delay you. I will definitely send you to Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion safely. Ching, lifted her skirt, walked to the front of the shaft, and got on the carriage briskly. She said, hurry up. I have to come back to report to Miss later. Miss Ching, don't worry. Leave it to me. The coachman said with a smile. He raised his hand and the carriage turned to go down the mountain. The carriage was very stable all the way. Ching, lifted the curtain and asked why it was so slow. The coachman also explained with a smile. On the one hand, the horse was not in good spirits, and on the other hand, it was for the sake of safety. If the carriage was overturned in a hurry, it would be dangerous. Since the coachman said so, Ching, certainly could not say anything more. She immediately held the box in her hand tightly and dozed off. After the coachman outside walked slowly for a while, he called into the carriage a few times, Miss Ching, Miss Ching, It was quiet in the carriage without any sound. It seemed that she had fallen asleep out of boredom. The coachman showed a trace of complacency on his face. He only needed to stall the fifth Mrs. People, and other things had nothing to do with him. He reached out and touched his bosom. There was an ingot of silver there, which was equivalent to his salary for several months. The carriage almost arrived at Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion in time of the curfew. Ching, went in. After a while, an old maid came out of the mansion and asked the coachman to drive the carriage into the mansion. It was obviously not the best time to go up the mountain. What a waste. You can't even do such a small thing well. The old maid slapped the maid kneeling outside the courtyard and scolded angrily. The maid was slapped and knelt on the ground, but she did not dare to say anything. Her face was swollen like a steamed bun. What's the matter? A soft voice suddenly came from the roadside. The old maid hurriedly put down her raised hand, adjusted her face, and came over with a smile. First miss, this girl did something wrong, and old madam is punishing her. Even if she did something wrong, she shouldn't beat her like this. Let her go back first. I'll plead with my grandmother later. What will others say if they see it? Xiao Yenru said softly. She was dressed in a light purple dress, which was not only elegant but also dignified. With her delicate face, she looked like a beauty even though it was late. Qi Rongji, who was standing not far behind her, looked at her back with a complicated expression and lowered her head silently. She had been in Duke Xing's mansion for more than 2 years, and she had indeed become the miss of Duke Xing's mansion, whom she had envied in the past, and had been educated by old madam of Duke Xing's mansion. She had thought that she could get whatever she wanted from then on, but she did not expect that this first miss would appear. Compared with this first miss of Duke Xing's mansion, she was almost transparent and felt ashamed of her inferiority. The most important thing was that she found that she couldn't make decisions in Duke Xing's mansion and had to listen to the first miss for everything. Gradually, she became the first miss's follower. But was this her original intention? She had to do this. Her marriage was in the hands of old madam of Duke Xing's mansion, and old madam doted on this first miss most. Qi Rongji was not young. If she was in Jiangzhou, her parents would definitely help her choose a husband. But here, because this first miss had not been engaged, other misses of Duke Xing's mansion could not be engaged, including her adopted daughter. Thinking of what her eldest brother had said to her before, Qi Rongji's heart was very heavy. Yes, first miss is so kind. Hurry up and thank first miss. The old maid nodded and bowed, and then scolded the servant girl who was kneeling beside her. Thank you, first Mississippi. Thank you, first miss. The servant girl looked at Xiao Yenru gratefully and thanked her sincerely, with tears streaming down her face. Xiao Yenru glanced at the servant girl and did not stop at all. She walked inside and asked the old maid beside her, I heard that grandmother was so angry that she didn't even have dinner. What made her so angry? It's really hard for me to say. First miss, please go in and ask. If you ask, old madam will definitely be happy, the old maid said obsequiously. Everyone knew that the first miss was the apple of old madam's eye and could do whatever she said. The first miss was good-looking, gentle, kind, and noble. She was qualified to be a princess in the future. It would be better if she could go further. The supervisor old maid's smile became more and more obsequious. She took a few steps forward and reached out to lift the curtain for Xiao Yenru. Her flattering voice was almost different from the one who had rebuked the servant girl before. Old madam, the first miss has come to see you. Then she reported to the room. When Xiao Yenru entered the room, the curtain in the old maid's hand fell in front of Qi Rongji and almost hit her face. Fortunately, she stopped in time. Chunyi stepped forward angrily and wanted to get angry, but was stopped by Qi Rongji. After living in Duke Xing's mansion for more than 2 years, she had learned some things that she had not learned before and knew clearly that Xiao Yenru was the person she should flatter. Chunyi glared at the old maid fiercely and reached out to lift the curtain. Qi Rongji stepped in. In the room, old madam had already received the message and knew that Xiao Yenru had come in, but she still looked very angry. Grandma, don't be angry. Tell me what's wrong. Can help you solve your problems, okay? Xiao Yenru entered the room and saw old madam's gloomy face. She smiled more and more gently, took a few steps forward, took one of old madam's hands, and shook it a few times in a charming manner. After Qi Rongji entered the room and bowed to old madam obediently, she stood aside like a transparent person. It's nothing. It's just some ignorant people. Old madam said angrily. The person who went to the Yuhui nunnery had already come back to report that the servant girl did not succeed. Not only did Xiao Wu's reputation not be damaged, but the original plan also lost the initiative. As long as she thought of this, old madam was full of anger. Grandma, if they are ignorant people, just move them away. Grandma, tell Ru, and I will do it. I will never let them anger you. Xiao Yenru said softly with an increasingly affectionate smile. You little girl, things can be moved away, but how can people be moved away? Amused by her, old madam reached out to touch her forehead and said. If things can be moved away, of course, people who are in the way can also be moved away. If it doesn't work once, we can move it twice. If it doesn't work twice, we can move it 3 times. I think there is no person or thing that can't be moved away. Xiao Yenru said with a smile, as if she said it carelessly. Old madam suddenly felt that her eldest granddaughter's careless words were really what she wanted. If it didn't work once, she would do it twice. If it didn't work twice, she would do it the 3rd time. She didn't believe that this girl would be so lucky every time. She couldn't let this girl come back to Duke Xing's mansion in one piece. Previously, when she was not in the Fu, the whole Fu was fine. It had only been a few days since she was recognized back, and so many things had happened. Not to mention the rumors outside, the 2nd and 3rd branches in the Fu had been estranged from each other for so many years. Every time the 3rd branch talked about the accident, old madam felt speechless. Sometimes, she had to pretend that she didn't understand and didn't understand. Both the palm and the back of the hand were flesh. Although the 3rd branch didn't like it, it was her bloodline after all. Then tomorrow's matter would continue. With this in mind, she immediately looked better. She took Xiao Yenru's hand and asked her a lot of questions. After that, Xiao Yenru made her happy. Seeing that it was getting late, she sent her and Qi Rongji back. After saying goodbye to old madam, Xiao Yenru walked out with Qi Rongji. When they walked outside, Xiao Yenru said gently, Sister Rongji, you can go back. It's still early. Sister, don't you want to walk with me? Qi Rongji finally had a chance to speak. Because she hadn't spoken for a long time, she said in a hoarse voice. No, I'll let you accompany me next time. Xiao Yenru said lightly. Just now, Xiao Yenru invited Qi Rongji to walk with her. Now they walked to the door of old madam's room, and she only said a word to her after such a long time. This kind of thing had happened in the past 2 years. Neither Xiao Yanru nor Qi Rongji took it seriously. For her, Qi Rongji was just a prop when she needed it. And it was a prop that couldn't make any sound. After sending Qi Rongji away, Xiao Yanru reached out to pick a blooming flower on the roadside. The flower was fragrant and enchanting. It turned out to be a Tang Qianyan that had bloomed early. She put it under her nose and sniffed it. A trace of coldness appeared on her face, which had always been gentle. Xiao Wanru got the album of paintings that Qing took down the mountain in the middle of the night. The finished album was exactly the same as before, as if none of the pages had been changed. Even the fine seams inside were very delicate. After looking through it, Xiao Wanru breathed a sigh of relief. No matter who came to see it, it was a complete album. No matter who old madam intended to show it to, she could rest assured. She thought that by stopping Qing, she could ask the painter to change the page in time. No matter whose idea it was a wasted effort this time. How is it? A lazy voice came from a couch on one side. There was a couch for beauties in the corner of the silence room, but it was placed in the wing room on the other side during the day. At this moment, the person leaning on the beauty couch was Prince Chen, who was said to be dying of illness. Thank you, Your Highness. Xiao Wanru was speechless for a moment, but she still bowed sideways. She really didn't expect to trouble this prince. It was just to send a box. Was it necessary to use this prince? Accompany this king for a walk. Chu Luqian stood up, stretched his arms, picked up a cloak placed on the screen casually, and walked over to put it on Xiao Wanru. The cloak was a little big, covering her so that she could hardly be seen. Even her snow-white and delicate face was covered in it. Your Highness, where are you going? Xiao Wanru pulled the collar around her neck warily and asked. I heard that the Yuhui nunnery has been unstable recently, but the scenery at night is getting better and better. It's rare for me to go up the mountain at night, so I have to go and have a look. Chu Luqian said slowly, raised his beautiful eyes, and reached out to tie the belt on Xiao Wanru's collar. Chapter 504. The night was just right. However, if the night was just right and the moon was dark and the wind was strong, it would make people feel that something was wrong. 1, 2, and 3 black figures appeared in her sight. Even their clothes were dark in the night. If Xiao Wanru hadn't been staring at them, she wouldn't have noticed that there were 3 more people in the shadow in the corner. One of them came out from the tightly closed side door stealthily. Her cherry lips were wide open, and her watery eyes were filled with horror as she looked at the 3 people hiding below. The side door had been closed, and the 3 people quickly flashed to the shadow of the wall. At this time, they seemed to observe for a while and didn't find anything unusual. The 3 people moved carefully, sometimes slowly and sometimes hurriedly, but they didn't make any sound. Xiao Wanru held Chu Liuqian's body tightly and stared down with her heart beating fast for a while. She didn't know whether it was because of the scene in front of her or her current situation. Chu Luqian took her up a big tree, which was not located at the side door, but not far away, so they could see clearly what was at the side door. Chu Luqian leaned lazily against the big tree trunk and put one hand on Xiao Wanru's slender waist. He looked lazy, which made Xiao Wanru feel very insecure, so she subconsciously held him tightly. She didn't dare to move for fear of falling. However, when she saw the 3 people hiding, she immediately focused her attention on them. He watched as the 3 of them moved and carefully left. He also watched as the 3 of them entered a small courtyard. There seemed to be someone at the gate of the courtyard. As soon as the 3 people came over, the gate opened. After the 3 people entered the courtyard, the gate closed silently and entered the room in the middle. The room was lit with dim yellow light. It was very dark, and she could only vaguely see the flashing figures. She didn't know what they were doing. After a while, the light went out. After waiting for a while, the people in the room didn't come out, as if they had been settled in the room. Your Highness, who are these people? Xiao Wanru said with a strange look. She recognized the owner of this courtyard, who was obviously Mo Chioi, who had begged Rui, and great elder princess, to take her fellow villagers down the mountain. Originally, Xiao Wanru didn't pay much attention to that girl. The only thing that surprised her was that she could stay in the Yuhui nunnery for 5 years and grow from a child to a young girl. Moreover, she was a young girl who was a little aloof. Xiao Wanru had lived in the Yuhui nunnery for a long time, and they lived close to each other. Even though Xiao Wanru lived in seclusion, they still met several times. Every time they met, Mo Chioi would bow politely from a distance and then turn to leave. Although she looked gentle and polite, she was obviously not a person who was easy to get along with. Even if they didn't bump into each other by chance, she would still lower her head and give way. She was originally a strange person, but not as strange as she was now. In addition, her previous strange behavior further confirmed Xiao Wanru's thoughts. Just some wishful thinking. Chu Luqian leaned back and said casually. Does what happened that day have something to do with her? Xiao Wanru thought for a while and asked. Some recent things were slowly strung together, and there was a looming trace. Some people think that the things behind the high wall are very secret and others won't know. Now it seems that they can't hide it, so they want to come out. Chu Luqian smiled very gently. The moonlight fell on his handsome eyebrows, showing an indescribable laziness and gentleness. He leaned against the trunk and stepped on the swaying branches, but still gave people a feeling of calmness and elegance. Xiao Wanru slipped and almost screamed in fear. She hurriedly reached out to hold Chu Luqian's strong waist more tightly. Looking at the dark under the tree, she said in a trembling voice, Your Highness, let's go down and talk. It's good here. The scenery is good and it's cool. Chu Luqian looked sideways at her. Seeing her cherry lips, which were a little pale because of fear, he suddenly smiled, which made people even angrier. Your Highness, it's actually cool down there. It's autumn, and it's cool at night. Xiao Wanru calmed down and tried to make herself look normal. I'm hot. Chu Luqian's handsome eyes seemed to be about to close, showing a kind of leisure. Was it okay to take a nap in such a place? Xiao Wanru was very nervous and hurriedly said sincerely, Your Highness, let me help you fan. If he took a nap and loosened his hand, she would really fall down. You're not good at fanning. Chu Luqian refused decisively. I'm good at fanning, very good. In order to make herself look more sincere, Xiao Wanru tried to raise her head to look at Chu Luqian's face. The moonlight fell on her watery eyes, almost covering them with a layer of mist, which made her delicate face more like a flower and her watery eyes more charming. Even though she was so scared that her face was pale, she inexplicably made people feel that she was delicate and pitiful. Chu Luqian opened his eyes and looked at her. Suddenly, he reached out to hold her in his arms and said, Don't worry, I won't let you fall down. Xiao Wanru felt a little stronger around her waist, which gave her a sense of security. In her opinion, Chu Luqian was weak and thin. However, when she was held tightly by him, she didn't find him as thin as she had imagined. She even felt that his whole body was tied up and very strong. Didn't they say that he was a dying patient? Feeling that she was in a safe situation, Xiao Wanru got the temper to talk about business again. She glanced at the courtyard not far below and asked, Have you planned this for a long time? Mo Chioi had been here for 5 years, so this plan should have been made 5 years ago or earlier, right? Very long. Chu Luqian said casually. He slightly narrowed his handsome eyes, which looked a little gloomy under the moonlight. Is this the most suitable time? Xiao Wanru paused and suddenly realized. They had waited for 5 years or more, and there had never been any unusual movement before. But recently, there was. It could be seen that it was the most suitable opportunity. No, I forced him to come out. Chu Luqian said in a low voice. Xiao Wanru stopped talking and thought of what happened that night. That night, Chu Luqian happened to be there. After that, what happened in the Yuhui nunnery was undoubtedly related to him. But if it didn't involve Great Elder Princess, Xiao Wanru wouldn't ask more. But at this time, she had to be careful. Is it related to the royal family? It's very related. But it will be fine in the future, and there won't be any big trouble in the Yuhui nunnery. Chu Luqian snorted coldly and looked at the room. He could clearly know that there was no one in the room. They should have gone down the mountain along the tunnel. He silently raised the corners of his thin lips and narrowed his eyes coldly. It depended on whether he had the ability to take advantage of others. Did he really think that his defense was flawless? Xiao Wanru didn't know when she returned to the room, but she fell asleep in Chu Luqian's arms. In her dream, she felt that she had returned to Jiangzhou and was on the swing frame in her back garden. The swing frame was swaying, which made her both happy and nervous. But there seemed to be some sound, which seemed to be far away, but also seemed to be near, so she couldn't sleep well. It was just that. When she woke up, it was already dawn. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw Chu Lu and Yujie coming in, and they had prepared the things for her to wash up. She rubbed her eyes and sat up. She looked around subconsciously and breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that she was still in the silence room. Chu Lu helped her up, and Yujie tidied up the couch. There was only one couch in the silence room, and now it was her place to sleep and meditate. She had told Rui and Great Elder Princess before that the courtyard should be empty. If Rui and Great Elder Princess went to the Yuhui nunnery, she could settle down there. She occupied Xiao Yenru's silence room, which was both a place to meditate and a place to rest and sleep. It looked more pious. Since she had let out such a rumor before, she would naturally do the same at this time. Fortunately, the courtyard was large enough. Except for the main room in the middle, all the other rooms were empty. It was good to walk in the courtyard to get some fresh air, so she wouldn't be stuffy. After washing up, Chu Lu tied up her hair, inserted a simple hairpin, and let her hair fall down casually. Xiao Wanru was dressed in black, which looked casual and simple, but was extremely beautiful. Even in the simplest clothes, Xiao Wanru showed two different feelings of elegance and charm. Her thick cherry lips, jade-like skin, delicate facial features, and beautiful black hair made her look like a blooming flower. "Miss, the supervisor old maid from yesterday is here again." Chu Lu finished combing her hair and put down the comb before reporting. "What's the matter?" Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows. Looking at herself in the mirror, she also raised her eyebrows and suddenly felt very interesting. "She said that she has something important to talk to you." "Hui Ming Nun is also waiting outside," Chu Lu said. In fact, these two people had come early in the morning, but Chu Lu and Yujie didn't intend to wake Xiao Wanru up. Seeing her get up, they didn't tell her until she washed up in a hurry. The two of them had learned Xiao Wanru's intention yesterday. How could they not understand that these two people came early in the morning with bad intentions? "Miss, have breakfast first. Anyway, it can't be rushed." Yujie took the food basket from the side and opened it. She took out a bowl of porridge, 2 plates of pickled vegetables, a plate of dried tofu, and 2 steamed buns and put them on the table. Xiao Wanru sat in front of the table, picked up the porridge and began to eat. For a moment, the room was very quiet. After eating, she pushed the 2 steamed buns and said, "I don't like steamed buns." "Miss, you are growing up. Such a little porridge is definitely not enough. You should eat more steamed buns, lest you get hungry later." Yujie advised and pushed the plate with steamed buns in front of Xiao Wanru. "No." Xiao Wanru firmly pushed the plate to Yujie. For some reason, she just didn't like steamed buns. "Miss, shall I go to exchange for steamed buns with mushrooms for you?" Chu Lu asked tentatively. "There are no steamed buns left," Yujie said angrily. Of course, she knew that her master didn't like steamed buns, but she got angry when she mentioned it. How could it be such a coincidence that the steamed buns with mushrooms were gone when her master went to get them? Chapter 505. "Fifth Miss, I'm here to ask for the picture album on the table in Yuhui Nunnery." I heard from Hui Ming Nun that it was with you, so I came to get it. Old Madam wants to see it. After the old maid of Duke Xing's mansion came in, she bowed to Xiao Wanru and then said with a smile on her face. Picture album? Xiao Wanru raised her voice slightly and frowned, looking a little unhappy. Yes, it's that booklet. I showed it to Fifth Miss before. At that time, Fifth Miss didn't say that she wanted to change it after reading it. After that, it was knocked to the ground by a maid. Fifth Miss picked it up and read it again. When I left, Fifth Miss was still reading it very seriously. Hui Ming put her palms together and smiled very kindly. The story of the picture album was very clear. As soon as she finished speaking, she saw that Xiao Wanru's face became more and more unpleasant. When First Miss went down the mountain, she said that there was such a picture album. It was a kind of arrangement for the ritual. First Miss said that she didn't understand it, so she picked one at random. Old Madam felt uneasy, so she asked me to go up the mountain to take the picture album down and pick one again. The supervisor Nanny smiled brightly, almost like a blooming chrysanthemum. It seemed that she didn't see the displeasure on Xiao Wanru's face. Originally, this kind of picture album can't be taken down the mountain, but Old Madam of your mansion is different, so you can take it down and have a look at it temporarily. Hui Ming explained with a smile. The two of them cooperated very well. Every word they said implied that they had to take out the picture album. I want to have a look at this picture album. After I finish reading it, I will send it down the mountain to Old Madam. Xiao Wanru lowered her eyes coldly. After a long while, she raised her head and said indifferently. Didn't you finish reading it yesterday, Fifth Miss? Besides, there are only a few pages. Hui Ming said in surprise. Can't my miss read it more? Can it be that my miss is only allowed to have a look at the things taken out by your Yuhui nunnery? Yu Jie was angry and said coldly. How could it be? But Old Madam at the foot of the mountain is urging me. She is waiting for me in the mansion now. How about this? Fifth Miss, let Old Madam have a look at her first. After that, I will send her here, okay? The old maid of Duke Xing's mansion was good at talking. She straightened things out with a smile. Xiao Wanru twitched the corners of her mouth. Her words sounded nice, as if she was thinking for Xiao Wanru. But in fact, Old Madam was waiting and waiting. As a junior, she couldn't keep her even if she wanted to. The so-called whether or not he would look at it in the future was just a formality. No one would take it seriously. Hui Ming didn't say anything and just put her palms together with a smile. In her opinion, no matter what Xiao Wanru said, she had to take out the picture album. She suppressed Xiao Wanru in the name of Old Madam. How could she dare to refuse? Xiao Wanru didn't say anything and only looked at Yu Jie. Yu Jie understood, took 2 steps forward, stood in front of the old maid, and deliberately changed the topic. Yesterday, it was you who punished the servant girl and let her frame my miss with ambiguous words, right? I really didn't know what happened yesterday. This girl has always been timid and clumsy. Who knew that she would cause such a misunderstanding? I was really wronged. At that time, I forgot her when I was in a hurry. Who knew that such a naive girl was still kneeling there? The old maid had been prepared. When she heard Yu Jie's question, she immediately complained that she had been wronged. Was it a misunderstanding? Yu Jie glared at the old maid and said. Of course it was a misunderstanding. Could it be that someone wants to frame Fifth Miss? That servant girl was brought from the mansion. Fifth Miss, it was the first time you saw her. Even if there was something, it couldn't be related to Fifth Mississippi. I really made a mistake. It's all my fault. I hope Fifth Miss can forgive me. The old maid in charge said with a smile. This matter had passed, and Xiao Wanru was not hurt at all. The old maid didn't think it was a big deal. It was just a matter that the Fifth Miss took out to divert her attention, and she wouldn't take it seriously. Kneel down. Xiao Wanru's voice was cold and gloomy. The old maid and Hui Ming were both shocked. Although Xiao Wanru looked unhappy just now, at least there was a smile on her face from time to time. But no one had expected that she would suddenly attack at this time. Fifth miss. The old maid stammered. Our miss asked you to kneel, so you should kneel. Yujie raised her leg and kicked the old maid's leg hard. The old maid took 2 steps back and fell heavily to the ground. Fifth miss, I don't know what I did wrong to make you so angry. What happened yesterday was originally a misunderstanding. After the servant girl came back, I also went to report it to old madam. Old madam also reprimanded me and only said that I should not do it again next time. She would let it go this time. Fifth miss, do you think you still want to pursue this matter? The old maid's leg was in pain from the kick. Looking at Huiming's surprised look beside her, the old maid's face burned and she only felt ashamed. Just now, when she and Huiming were waiting outside the room, they had whispered to each other. The old maid also said that the fifth miss inside was not a threat and did not dare to punish her for what happened yesterday. This time, not only did she fall, but it was also equivalent to a heavy slap in the face. The old maid was indignant for a moment. She used old madam to suppress her. She was sure that she did not dare to do anything to her. Xiao Wanru sneered and said, if I was really framed by a servant girl yesterday, my reputation would be damaged. You just said that I should not do it again. I didn't know that the rules of Duke Xing's mansion would be so lax. They can even escape punishment by saying that they should not do it again. Yujie. I'm here. Go, send this old maid to the carriage at the gate of Yuhui Nunnery for disrespecting and framing her master. I can't afford such a servant who disrespects her master and framing her master. Xiao Wanru said with a gloomy face, and there was a chilling coldness in her bright watery eyes. Yes, I'll pull her out now. Yujie nodded and was about to pull the old maid. The old maid panicked. She reached out to hold the pillar beside her and said loudly, Fifth miss, what happened yesterday really has nothing to do with me. I just accidentally left this servant girl here. I really didn't want to hurt you. The old maid was really panicked at this time. It was said that many people had seen what happened yesterday. When she entered Yuhui Nunnery today, many people were saying that if the pilgrims in the nunnery today knew that she was the mastermind of what happened yesterday, she would not be able to escape the crime of a servant bullying her master. If she was dragged out all the way, many people would see it. Fifth miss, it's really not me. I really didn't hurt you. Yujie had reached out her hand with great strength. Even though the old maid was holding the pillar, she could hardly hold it at this time and shouted anxiously. Fifth miss, can you listen to me? Huiming couldn't stand it anymore and hurriedly stepped forward. What's the matter? Xiao Wanru raised her eyes and waved her hand. Yujie stepped aside. Fifth miss, this kind of thing shouldn't be dealt with in the nunnery. No matter whether this old maid really committed a crime or not, she has to be taken to the mansion for a trial. Otherwise, if something really happens, it will be fifth miss who will be embarrassed. In Yuhui Nunnery, people will only talk about you, which will affect your reputation. What do you mean, nun? Xiao Wanru seemed to be moved. This matter was caused by old madam of your mansion. We have to report it to old madam. Fifth miss, why don't you send someone to take this old maid down the mountain and let old madam punish her? Huiming Nun seemed to be on Xiao Wanru's side and considerate of her with a very kind attitude. Xiao Wanru looked a little hesitant, as if she couldn't make up her mind at the moment. Seeing this, Huiming immediately added fuel to the fire. Fifth miss, you are now in the Yuhui Nunnery. To put it bluntly, you are like a monk. If you get angry easily, others will only think that you are too arrogant on the mountain instead of observing mourning for the former heir and the infanta. It's not good to do that. Okay, let her go down the mountain and let old madam deal with it. Xiao Wanru narrowed her eyes slightly. After thinking for a while, she nodded obediently. The old maid broke into a sweat and then said carefully, Fifth miss, please let me take the picture album down the mountain, and then I will go to old madam to ask for punishment. You still want to take the picture album down the mountain at this time? Xiao Wanru sneered. Although I am guilty, I came up the mountain this time for the picture album. Fifth Miss, if you let me take the picture album down the mountain, I will not be punished by old madam for the second time. Please save me, Fifth Miss. The old maid burst into tears. While wiping her tears, she kowtowed from time to time. Looking at the red marks on her forehead, one could tell that she kowtowed heavily. I won't give you the picture album for the time being, lest you want to use it as a scapegoat again. Tell old madam that I will definitely ask someone to take it down the mountain after reading it. Xiao Wanru said casually. She rolled her watery eyes, which were shining brightly, but there was a hint of laziness that came from her bones. Fifth Miss. The old maid cried and begged, Fifth Miss, please forgive me this time. Let me take the picture album down the mountain. I won't make any mistakes in the future. Fifth Miss, please rest assured. Yujie, take her down. Xiao Wanru rubbed her forehead and said lightly. Yes. Yujie came over and pulled the old maid hard. The old maid was caught off guard and had let go of her hand. At this time, she was pulled out by Yujie, leaving only a voice behind, Fifth Miss, Fifth Miss. It suddenly became quiet in the room, and only the cry of the old maid outside could be heard. Huiming Nun, is there anything else? Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows, looked at Huiming, who was stunned, and asked lightly. I'm fine. I'll leave now. Huiming swallowed hard and was a little flustered in her heart. Was this Fifth Miss Xiao really like what First Miss said? Thank you, Huiming Nun. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and looked relaxed. She waved her hand and Huiming left. She saw the old maid who had stood up with red eyes and was holding the door frame to calm her breath. Their eyes met silently. Then there was a smile in Huiming's eyes, but she didn't stop. She walked out of the courtyard slowly with a trace of thoughtfulness in her eyes. As expected, the Fifth Miss Xiao was afraid of mentioning the picture album, so she deliberately used other things to refuse old madam's request for the picture album. Chapter 506. The old maid of Duke Xing's mansion went back gloomily, and Qing also went up the mountain in a carriage. In fact, the two carriages passed by each other on the mountain road. Qing lifted the curtain and was looking at the scenery. When she saw the carriage of Duke Xing's mansion coming down the mountain, she was stunned for a moment and then saw the old maid in charge also looking out of the window. When the carriages passed by each other, the two of them looked at each other silently and then looked away. The curtain fell and the carriages passed by each other. When they came to the mountain, Qing got out of the carriage and went to find Xiao Wanru anxiously. She was in a hurry all the way and almost bumped into several nuns. She apologized and walked forward in a panic. It was obvious that something was wrong. Looking at the things in her hands, the nuns were surprised and proud. Qing didn't notice who she bumped into at all. She couldn't recognize all the nuns in the nunnery, so at this time, she certainly wouldn't spend the effort to see who it was. Under the surprised gazes of the nuns, Qing was almost in a panic. She returned to the courtyard where Xiao Wanru was in a daze, and then the door was closed heavily. No one knew what happened next inside. It seemed that it was not a small matter to scare the little girl, who looked a little naughty and cute in the past. Could it be that something serious had happened? The people who saw it were all suspicious, thinking that Fifth Miss Xiao inside must be in a hurry. Of course, some people were anxious, and some people were happy. Huiqing and Huiming both went to report it to their master with a smile on their faces. The silence room was not as chaotic as outsiders had imagined. The master and servants were in a panic, but it was very peaceful. Xiao Wanru didn't look at the picture album carefully last night. At this time, she was reading it. After looking through it, she nodded and sighed, "This booklet is well made, just like the original one. No matter how I look at it, I can't tell that the one in the middle was added later. Grandmother's actions are really fast and good. Miss, this booklet was made by Prince. Last night, Great elder princess had no choice but to ask me to take it to prince and ask him to find a way. Qing pouted and felt indignant for her prince. Grandma asked him to do it. Xiao Wanru said seriously. But that was done by your highness. Qing murmured softly, but then she didn't continue. She saw that her master's ears were a little red. Miss, when I went up the mountain, I met the carriage of Duke Xing's mansion. Did I come here for you? Xiao Wanru didn't blush at the mention of Chu Luchen as Qing had thought. She thought of how she held Chu Liuchen's waist tightly in the tree yesterday and felt inexplicably ashamed and annoyed. She would never climb the tree again. The old maid came with Hui Ming yesterday. She said that she wanted the picture album that Miss saw yesterday. Obviously, the picture album was dirted by them. If she took out the original one, I don't know what would happen. Yu Jie said angrily. She remembered that the old maid said to her in a cold voice before leaving that she would definitely come to get the picture album. She said that her miss could not hide it even if she wanted to. She felt sullen. If they want to take it, let them take it. Xiao Wanru casually put the picture album aside, and coldness flashed across her watery eyes. The previous one was just to explore the way, and the next one was the real deal. As expected, in the afternoon, Duke Xing's mansion sent another person. This time, it was Nanny Yu, who was an old acquaintance of old madam. As soon as she saw Xiao Wanru, she immediately smiled and was very respectful to Xiao Wanru. She called Xiao Wanru fifth miss intimately. Those who didn't know her might really think that Nanny Yu really treated Xiao Wanru as her master. Fifth miss, can you let me take this picture album away? Old madam and Empress Dowager are still waiting. After chatting for a while, Nanny Yu told her the purpose of her visit and said with a smile. Empress Dowager. Xiao Wanru frowned. What did this matter have to do with Empress Dowager? Empress Dowager asked old madam to go to the imperial palace for a talk. She happened to talk about this matter. She said that the picture album of Yuhui Nunnery was exquisite. Not only was it carefully designed, but it was also painted by Pushun Nun. There is only one such picture album in the world. As you know, Master Pushun's painting is also hard to find outside. Unexpectedly, she painted it into a picture album for the religious ceremony. Empress Dowager was curious, so she asked me to come to get it. Nanny Yu explained with a smile. Therefore, this matter would be revealed to Empress Dowager now. Xiao Wanru's hand moved, and the teacup fell. There was a trace of deepness in her watery eyes. She was a little surprised, but she didn't feel surprised. Only Master Pushun in Yuhui Nunnery could paint that kind of painting skill, such an exquisite picture album, and such a fine paper and pigment. Fortunately, she had been practicing in the past 3 years. Fortunately, she was also good at painting in her last life. Otherwise, she really couldn't find someone who could paint according to that painting in a short time. She silently raised the corner of her mouth. Old madam was unwilling to bear the reputation of being unkind, so she sent herself to Empress Dowager. Even if Empress Dowager was angry at that time, she couldn't blame it on her. What a good plan. Master Pushun's painting? I didn't see it for a while. Xiao Wanru frowned slightly and asked softly. Yes. First Miss has been praising it since she came down the mountain. Old madam sent someone to get it before, but I didn't expect that she sent the old maid who made trouble yesterday. This time Empress Dowager wants to see it. Old madam thought it was appropriate for me to come here, in case of any accident. Nanny Yu said with a smile. Her words were extremely satisfactory, and it blocked all the way for Xiao Wanru to explain. She had to give the picture album to old Madam Dowager. Yesterday, when I saw this album, I really liked it. I thought it would be very inappropriate to just casually throw this album away, so I specially made a bag and wanted to put this album in it. This way, it wouldn't break easily when I take it out and put it in. But now, I'm still closing the last opening, Xiao Wanru said with a hesitant look. It seemed that she was in a dilemma. There's still a gap. Then I'll wait for a while and seal the gap before leaving. Nanny Yu said enthusiastically. Since she said so, Xiao Wanru seemed to have no way to avoid it. She could only ask Yujie to find the cover and the picture album that she had made before. The cover only had a few stitches to seal the gap. The material was good, and it was made into a long strip that could fit the picture album. After Xiao Wanru asked Yujie to put the picture album in, she picked up the needle and thread in person and asked about old madam while sewing. Nanny Yu answered very carefully. Others looked down on the fifth miss, but Nanny Yu would never look down on the fifth Mississippi. Since the fifth miss saved old madam, Nanny Yu had felt that the fifth miss was not an ordinary person and couldn't be treated as an ordinary Mississippi. After talking for a while, Xiao Wanru cut the thread in her hand and suddenly said, "Oh. What's the matter, fifth miss?" Nanny Yu's heart skipped a beat and she hurriedly said, with her eyes falling on the cloth bag in Xiao Wanru's hand. "I was chatting with you all the way just now, so I actually sealed the gap. Should I tear it open and redo it?" Xiao Wanru pulled the opening of the bag and said. Previously, there was no seam on this side, but now there was a gap. Nanny Yu had been talking with Xiao Wanru carefully before, so she didn't notice the work in her hand. At this time, when she saw the sealed bag, she was stunned. She had to tear the gap forcibly to take out the picture album in this way. "Nanny Yu, wait a minute. I'll redo it. After I finish it, I'll send it to the Imperial Palace." Xiao Wanru looked guilty, pulled the seam, and said. Nanny Yu couldn't help glancing at the sky outside. At this time, it was getting late when they went down the mountain. If they delayed for a while, old madam and the first miss would have to leave the Imperial Palace. It would seem more deliberate to mention it next time. Thinking of Xiao Wanru's way of chatting with her just now, she immediately felt that Xiao Wanru was deliberately stalling for time. Moreover, it was good to seal it. At least she would not be suspected. She had been worried that after the incident, the fifth miss would blame it on her, but now it was okay. She immediately laughed and said, "Fifth miss, it doesn't matter. You can open the bag in front of the Empress Dowager. Maybe the Empress Dowager will think that the fifth miss is clever and skillful to protect the picture album so well." Xiao Wanru blushed at the praise, pinched the needle and thread in her hand uneasily, and said, "I've done it wrong. How can the Empress Dowager praise me? That's not necessarily true. When the Empress Dowager sees your needle and thread, she may not even be willing to open it." Nanny Yu teased, reached out to take the picture album from Xiao Wanru's arms, stood up, bowed to Xiao Wanru, and said, "I'm going to report it to old madam now." After saying that, she turned around and left in a hurry, as if she was afraid that Xiao Wanru would stop her. Looking at her hurried footsteps, the smile on Xiao Wanru's face slowly faded, and her eyes were cold. She wanted to know how her good grandmother would deal with this matter next. In the Empress Dowager's Palace of Benevolent Peace, there were not only old madam of Duke Xing's mansion, but also two other old madams. After talking with the Empress Dowager for a while, Xiao Yenru whispered something in old madam's ear, and the smile on old madam's face faded a little. The Empress Dowager turned her eyes and happened to see the scene in front of her. She asked with a smile, "What's the matter?" "Nothing. It's just that Ru is worried about the fifth Mississippi. She has been gone for so long and hasn't come back yet, so she is a little worried," old madam explained with a smile. Hearing her words, the Empress Dowager thought of the picture album about this matter in the Yuhui nunnery again. She raised her hand and said, "Go to the gate of the palace and have a look. Why hasn't she come back yet? It's enough time to go up and down the mountain." A eunuch answered and left. "She should come back soon. I'm worried that fifth sister is not sensible and doesn't take the picture album seriously. It's painted by Pushun Nun, and it's not easy to get it. When I was on the mountain, I learned painting from Pushun Nun, and Pushun Nun rarely painted by herself." Xiao Yenru blushed, stood up, and explained to the Empress Dowager softly. She entered the palace with old madam. She said that her grandmother was old and she was worried about her, so she escorted her all the way here and all the way back later. Such a filial and gentle look made the other two old madams envious. Just now, they kept holding Xiao Yenru's hand and praising her. Chapter 507. The eunuch went out of the main hall. Before he went far, he met Nanny Yu, who was led by a palace maid. It was also this palace maid who led Nanny Yu out of the palace and then waited at the gate of the palace, so she came back quickly. Seeing that Nanny Yu had arrived, the eunuch hurriedly went in to report. After a while, he brought Nanny Yu into the palace of benevolent peace. After saluting, he respectfully presented the picture album in the bag. Along the way, Nanny Yu did not dare to open the bag, for fear that she would not be able to explain what happened to the picture album. Originally, she was worried that she would be involved in this matter, so she wanted to ask a servant girl from Xiao Wanru to come with her. Now she directly put the picture album in the bag, which saved her trouble. Sealed. Who sealed it? When the bag was presented to the Empress Dowager, several old madams stretched their heads to have a look. When they saw clearly that it was in a sealed bag, an old madam of the Marquis's mansion couldn't help asking. Didn't she say that she had seen it before? Why did she seal it now? Another old madam of Duke Xing's mansion couldn't help asking. Old madam of Duke Xing's mansion was also very strange. She glanced at Nanny Yu, and Nanny Yu hurriedly reported, when I went to see the fifth miss was about to make a cover for the picture album. She said that it was not easy to get dirty in this way, so she tried to put the picture album in it. Unexpectedly, she forgot to do it while talking to me and sealed it. What a careless girl. The Empress Dowager smiled generously and handed the bag in her hand to a palace maid beside her. The palace maid went into the inner room, opened the bag with scissors, and then sent the bag out again. In front of everyone, she took out the picture album inside. Looking at the exquisite cover, several old madams nodded repeatedly. They didn't see the inside, but just looked at the cover and felt that it was a good one. Another palace maid took the picture album and presented it to the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager took it and opened the cover. Immediately, a lifelike portrait was so exquisite in front of everyone. Not only was the painting good, but also the painting was so detailed that there were various kinds of Buddha incense. Immediately, it was liked by old madams who liked to worship Buddha all year round. They praised it repeatedly. They also felt that Pushun Nun's skills were exquisite and unique. It was the first time that they had seen such a good portrait. Old Madam and Xiao Yenru also came over to have a look. Old Madam praised Pushun Nun repeatedly. She echoed Empress Dowager's words and pointed out Pushun Nun's painting skills. Xiao Yenru didn't interrupt. On the one hand, it was because she didn't have the status to interrupt here. On the other hand, it showed that she was dignified and steady. With a gentle smile on her face, it was easy for a girl who sat quietly aside to win the favor of the elders. She was not anxious at all. The Empress Dowager would hate her as much as she liked her now. It was such a big stain, and it was red and messy. Anyone who had just appreciated the beautiful painting in front of them would be displeased when this one suddenly popped out. Even a normal person would vent their anger on the person who made the stain, not to mention the Empress Dowager who was high up in front of them. It could be seen that the Empress Dowager was very fond of it and couldn't bear to part with it. The second one looked over, and there were more compliments. The Empress Dowager kept smiling happily and liked it as much as she could. The smile on Xiao Yenru's face involuntarily showed a little sarcasm. She really thought that she could make a great leap after acknowledging her ancestors. Even if she was protected by Rui and Great Elder Princess, so what? In the end, she was still trampled down. Her fifth sister, who had been trampled down from the high clouds to the mud, should be able to taste the bitter fruit of failure, one after another. Xiao Yenru, whose smile was stiff, changed her face. She remembered that at this time, the Empress Dowager had already turned over the dirty painting album, but why did she still not respond? She stole a glance at her grandmother and found that her grandmother's face was also stiff. It was inconvenient for her to say anything, nor to get too close. However, her grandmother had been very close to her just now and saw it very clearly. Xiao Yanru suddenly had a bad feeling. She panicked and fiercely crumpled the handkerchief in her hand. Could it be that there was an accident with the painting album? Although old madam hid what she had done from Xiao Yanru knew it clearly, including the dirty painting. In fact, Xiao Yanru was the one who secretly promoted all these, and old madam was just a person who did it on the surface. Including the matter of entering the imperial palace today, it was Xiao Yanru who calmly reminded old madam, so that old madam had such an idea. "Grandma, what's wrong with you?" Xiao Yanru asked softly, as if she didn't see old madam's stiff face with a smile. I'm fine." Old madam shook her head, but her heart trembled. Her face was not only stiff but also pale. She had spent so much effort on it. Was it going to be in vain again? A tender little hand held her hand and said, "Grandma, are you tired?" Xiao Yanru's soft and comforting voice sounded in her ear, which made old madam of Duke Xing's mansion feel that she was slowly recovering. There was a burst of coldness at the bottom of her eyes, but she continued to read it. She turned the painting album from the beginning to the back, and from the back to the front. After looking through it twice, Empress Dowager nodded repeatedly and passed the painting album in her hand to an old madam beside her. The old madam took it and looked through it from the beginning to the end. After that, she passed it to another old madam. When it was finally passed to Xiao Yanru, the other old madams present had all looked through it. All of them praised the techniques in the painting and the Buddha statue exposed in the corner. They all said that they would go to the Yuhui nunnery after a period of time to do a religious ceremony for their deceased relatives. At that time, they would choose one of the ways to place the painting album. She had been to the Yuhui nunnery many times over the years, but she didn't know that there were so many ways to place the painting album in the Yuhui nunnery. Xiao Yanru took it in her hand and looked at it carefully one by one. Since the paint had been stained, it could not disappear unless the whole piece of paper was destroyed. One of the paintings in the painting album was damaged. In such a short time, Xiao Wanru should not be able to find someone to paint it again in a short time. Moreover, this kind of painting method could not be painted by an ordinary painter. Could it be that Rui and Great Elder Princess had such a good technique that she not only made the painting exactly the same, but also changed everything flawlessly? She didn't believe it. The painting album in her hand stopped on that painting. She carefully rubbed the paper in her hand with her fingers and looked at this painting again. Suddenly, her eyes lit up. She had learned painting from Pushun Nun for a period of time and had seen countless paintings of Pushun Nun. The one in front of her seemed to be different. At first glance, it seemed that some details were handled differently, but when she looked at it carefully, it seemed that there was no difference. Was it the same or different? Xiao Yanru felt that there was something wrong. She rubbed her fingers on this paper and then turned to the previous one and rubbed it again. This paper was different. Afraid that she had seen it wrong, she rubbed it again. Sure enough, only this one was different. Needless to say, it must have been changed. This paper seems to be different. It's different from other papers. Xiao Yanru almost said to herself. Her voice was not high, but it could be heard by the people around her. Since old madam read the painting album, although she still had a smile on her face and said something to the Empress Dowager from time to time, her attention was actually not on the Empress Dowager. Hearing Xiao Yanru's words, her eyes lit up. She turned her head and asked anxiously, "What's the matter? Is there anything wrong?" Her eldest granddaughter was Pushun Nun's disciple. If anyone could recognize the difference in this painting album, it could only be her eldest granddaughter. Hearing her words, old madam felt as if the tight string had finally been loosened. She had a feeling that she had finally found the mistake this time. Old madam's voice became louder uncontrollably. Her sudden voice shocked the Empress Dowager and the other old madam, who were talking enthusiastically, and everyone turned their eyes to her. Seeing that everyone turned their eyes to her, Xiao Yanru blushed, hurriedly put down the painting album in her hand, knelt down in front of the Empress Dowager, and apologized softly, "It's my fault. I've alarmed the Empress Dowager. Is there something wrong with this painting album? The Empress Dowager waved her hand with a smile, asked the palace maid to help Xiao Yenru up, and asked curiously. This paper is different from other papers. At this time, old madam also restrained her gaffe just now. With a smile on her face, she took the painting album that Xiao Yenru had just held and handed it to the palace maid beside the Empress Dowager. The palace maid took it carefully and presented it to the Empress Dowager. There is a painting paper in this painting album that is different. The Empress Dowager understood. She raised her eyebrows and became more and more surprised. She reached out to take the painting album from the palace maid and asked, "Which one?" "The one in your hand is different from other papers." Old madam pointed to the open page and said with a smile, "If you don't believe me, you can touch it carefully and have a look." Hearing her words, the Empress Dowager became more curious. She reached out and touched this piece of paper, and then touched the other pieces of paper. It's really different. Why did Pushun Nun change a piece of paper to make a painting? Was it possible that there was no more paper? The Empress Dowager paid attention to it and really felt something different. The paintings in the same album basically used the same kind of paper, but now they were using a different kind of paper, which was really strange. Other madams also reached out their hands curiously, touched the corner, and nodded repeatedly. "Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion, do you know what Pushun Nun means? Could it be that this set is the best, so she changed another piece of paper?" After touching it, an old madam became interested. Could it be that this changed piece of paper was the most important opportunity? She looked at the old madam of Duke Xing's mansion with burning eyes, as if she could give an answer. Hearing her question, even the Empress Dowager became interested. If she had purely admired the painting just now, she felt it was interesting at this time, and also faintly felt that she had solved a puzzle. The blue veins on old madam's forehead bulged, and her smile almost froze on her face. Her hand twitched a little. At that moment, it was her instinctive reaction, but now she found that she could not justify herself. Chapter 508. The cold sweat on old madam's forehead began to come out. She found that there was something wrong with the paper and instinctively felt that she had something on Xiao Wanru. But now, she could not justify herself. This. I can't think of it at the moment. Old madam tried to keep calm, lowered her head in embarrassment and said. The Empress Dowager waved her hand indifferently and still looked at the picture album. She thought and said with a smile, "It's normal that you don't know. Originally, this kind of thing is the wisdom of the Yuhui nunnery. Maybe it has something to do with Buddhism. Master Pushun is an eminent monk of the Yuhui nunnery. How can her picture album be so easy for people to understand?" Xiao Yenru frowned tightly and pursed her lips. Thinking of what Pushun Nun said to her after she went up the mountain, an idea flashed in her mind. If Empress Dowager really wants to know, how about asking Pushun Nun to go down the mountain? She suggested carefully. Her words reminded the two old madams beside her, who nodded repeatedly and said, "If Empress Dowager wants to know what Pushun Nun's meaning is, why not ask Pushun Nun to go down the mountain? Yes, it may be a Buddhist saying. It's really interesting." Old madams and old madams of other families could always go up the mountain to worship Buddha, but it was inconvenient for the Empress Dowager to go out in the deep palace, especially to the Yuhui nunnery. The S of the late emperor were locked in the Yuhui nunnery. If the Empress Dowager went to the Yuhui nunnery, it might cause some other discussions. The Yuhui nunnery was different from the Huaguang temple. Even if the Empress Dowager wanted to go to the Yuhui nunnery, she could only go to the Huaguang temple. Ask Pushun Nun to come here. The Empress Dowager hesitated for a moment and thought it was feasible. When I was learning painting in the Yuhui nunnery, I occasionally mentioned the Empress Dowager, and Pushun Nun was very respectful. She said that the Empress Dowager was very talented, virtuous and precocious, and had been praised by the world in painting. If I have a chance to meet the Empress Dowager, I will be shameless to ask for advice. Xiao Yenru stood up and said respectfully. "Oh, Pushun Nun actually said so. The Empress Dowager said with a smile, which was rare. That's what Pushun Nun said. I'm just passing on her words. Xiao Yenru became more respectful. She bowed sideways and answered softly, looking dignified and decent. Old people liked this kind of well-behaved and decent girls the most. She looked very sincere with a little shyness, which was very convincing. Good, good, good. I must see Pushun Nun. The Empress Dowager was happy. This reminded her of what had happened in the past. When she was young, the Empress Dowager was indeed famous for her talents. If it wasn't for her talents, she wouldn't have married the sacred emperor who had yet to become the emperor. Hearing Xiao Yenru's words, she had more memories of her youth. Although the Empress Dowager knew that her painting was actually not that good, it was already very famous for her to have such a talent in the chaotic times at that time. Empress Dowager, how do you want to invite Pushun Nun to the palace? Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion calmed down at this time, rolled her eyes, and asked with a smile. This matter was good for her eldest granddaughter. If Pushun Nun won the Empress Dowager's favor, it would be a great thing for Ru-er. It could almost be regarded as having a spy around the Empress Dowager, who could listen to the Empress Dowager. This matter was a good thing for Ru-er and the whole Duke Xing's mansion. Of course, she fully supported it and tried to put it into practice. This. The Empress Dowager said happily just now, but she just said it casually. At this time, she was a little stunned by the question. I heard that there is also a hall for worshipping Buddha in the palace. I wonder who the preachers are. Xiao Yenru reminded softly. Yes, the hall in the palace is good. We can invite Pushun Nun to come over and preach scriptures for a period of time. The Empress Dowager nodded repeatedly. There was a hall in the palace for some who worshipped Buddha in the palace. The emperor was only one person, and most of the in the palace had nothing to do. Worshipping Buddha was also a hobby of some who were a little older but had always been neglected by the emperor. With this hobby, they could at least clear their minds and no longer fight for the emperor's favor wholeheartedly and make trouble. Seeing that the Empress Dowager was in a good mood, everyone accompanied her to talk about the past and even some things of the previous dynasty. Old madams present were not young. They had experienced the things of the previous dynasty and the current dynasty. Some were sad, and some were happy. When they talked about it, they felt the same. Xiao Yenru still sat behind the original seat. She had been sitting with her eyes down and a soft smile on her face. She listened quietly but did not say a word. This appearance made the elderly more fond of her, and they praised her from time to time. In the end, she blushed and could not even raise her head. After a while, seeing that the Empress Dowager was a little tired, all the old madams left together. The Empress Dowager smiled and asked them to come next time. After everyone left, the Empress Dowager reached out to touch her head and leaned against the chair. Nanny Wei stood up from behind her and reached out to massage her acupoints skillfully. The other palace servants in the hall all left, and it was very quiet for a moment. The Empress Dowager closed her eyes, seeming to be asleep, and her expression became peaceful. It was obvious that Nanny Wei massaged her acupoints very comfortably. What do you think of the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion? After a long while, the Empress Dowager's faint voice was heard. While massaging the Empress Dowager's acupoints, Nanny Wei said, "The first Miss Xiao is gentle, good-tempered, and well-behaved. I haven't seen such a sensible and well-behaved miss in so many years. The family education of Duke Xing's mansion must have a long history. The first Miss Xiao has such a good temper, and the fifth miss is even more lovely and sensible." As for the engagement between Xiao Wanru and Chu Luqian, others didn't know it, but how could Nanny Wei, who was the Empress Dowager's henchman, not know it? Chu Luqian was the Empress Dowager's darling. The Empress Dowager liked the fifth Miss Xiao. What was more, when Rui and Great Elder Princess came to the palace to talk with the Empress Dowager every other day, she would always say that the fifth miss was pitiful, filial, and the most sensible. In fact, Nanny Wei had long forgotten the appearance of the fifth Miss Xiao. She only vaguely remembered that she was well-behaved, sensible, delicate, and beautiful. If Chen had taken a fancy to the first Miss Xiao, I would have been relieved. The Empress Dowager sighed heavily and was unwilling to give up. Empress Dowager, the fifth Miss should also be good. Nanny Wei said softly. She knew what the Empress Dowager was worried about. Xiao Wu is too young. Although she has a maternal grandmother like Rui Han, she is still a maternal grandmother and can't compare with her maternal grandmother. But it seems that Duke Xing's mansion really doesn't care about Xiao Wu. Since they mentioned the Yuhui Nunnery and Pushun Nun, they didn't mention Xiao Wu. In the future, Duke Xing's mansion will definitely not be used by her, let alone protect Chen. The Empress Dowager's voice was very slow. She didn't have the smile when she talked to the old madams before, and there was some displeasure in her voice. Well, you are here, aren't you? With you, who will bully Prince Chen and the fifth Miss Xiao? Nanny Wei's heart skipped a beat, and she hurriedly said with a smile. I am old and will die one day. When I die, what will happen to my Chen? The Empress Dowager's eyes turned slightly red. What do you mean, Your Highness? Nanny Wei already had a bad feeling in her heart, but she had to follow the Empress Dowager's words and asked. She almost lost control of her strength. Fortunately, after so many years of service, she was very experienced, so she didn't let the Empress Dowager know her abnormality. Let Chen get to know Xiao Yenru more. Xiao Yenru is beautiful, talented, beautiful, and has a good reputation. Getting to know her more can improve their relationship. Chapter 509. As soon as Xiao Yenru helped old madam out of the carriage, she received the reward from the imperial palace. Old madam was overjoyed. After asking Xiao Yenru to thank her, she took Xiao Yenru back to her Chuntang courtyard. After sitting down, she couldn't wait to ask Xiao Yenru to open the gift box sent by the Empress Dowager. Today, none of the old madams present received the gift, but her granddaughter received it. At this time, old madam immediately became spirited. Grandma, what's this? Xiao Yenru was also full of joy. She opened it with a smile and her face changed slightly. There was a delicate and small ruler made of white jade in the gift box. What does this mean? Xiao Yenru was so flustered that her eyes turned red. She looked at old madam with tears in her eyes. Old madam's face also turned pale. She picked up the ruler made of white jade and looked at it a few times. It was indeed a ruler made of white jade. The workmanship was very delicate and small. At first glance, it looked like a hairpin, which could be inserted in one's hair. But no matter how delicate it was still a ruler. Grandma, did I do anything rude in the imperial palace just now? Xiao Yenru asked uneasily. She raised her eyes and looked quite pitiful, which made old madam feel distressed. Old madam quickly put down the ruler in her hand, reached out to hold her in her arms, patted her on the back, and comforted her. It's okay. It's okay. You should blame my son for mentioning Pushun Nun in the imperial palace and saying a few more words for her. But I didn't say much. I just said a few words, and I didn't make it very obvious. Xiao Yenru wiped her tears with a handkerchief and said with grievance. Pushun Nun must have a very close relationship with you. Today's picture album was mentioned by us, and it was also our mansion's people who took it down from the mountain. Later, we mentioned that the paper was different. Finally, we mentioned Pushun Nun. The Empress Dowager may have misunderstood that we did all this because we wanted to recommend Pushun Nun to the imperial palace and thought that you were planning for Pushun Nun. Old madam comforted her with distress. Grandma, I said that because you couldn't speak at that time. I didn't really want to mention Pushun Nun's entering the imperial palace. Xiao Yenru explained softly. Grandma knows, Grandma knows, Grandma knows, Grandma knows that mentioned Pushun Nun to divert Empress Dowager's attention to help Grandma. Old Madam's expression became softer and softer. She only felt that she had implicated her eldest granddaughter today. If she hadn't hurriedly tried to seize some doubtful points to lead the matter to Xiao Wanru, she wouldn't have fallen into an awkward situation and couldn't answer, and her eldest granddaughter wouldn't have been given a ruler by the Empress Dowager. Fortunately, this gift was brought back to look at. Otherwise, Ruer would have been wronged to death. She reached out to rub her forehead and felt a dull pain in her head. Xiao Wanru was indeed a troublemaker like her mother. They were still on the mountain, but they had made such a scene. Then what should we do? Xiao Yenru looked at old madam with her eyes wide open and said sadly. It's okay, it's okay. Don't mention Pushun Nun in front of Empress Dowager. Old madam said. She felt that this trouble was caused by her eldest granddaughter, and her eldest granddaughter didn't know what she had arranged. Unfortunately, Pushun Nun misunderstood Empress Dowager because she wanted to help her out. She felt very sorry for her. Go back and have a rest first. It's okay. Old madam comforted her and then let her granddaughter go back with a wronged face. Xiao Yenru stood up obediently. When she walked to the door, she suddenly stopped and regained her previous dignity and decency. She said, Grandma, if you are tired, have a good rest. Other things are trivial. As long as you are fine, it's okay even if Ru-er is punished again. Looking at her eldest granddaughter who had recovered, old madam felt increasingly distressed. At the same time, she felt very gratified. Xiao Wanru was raised by her side. Xiao Wanru couldn't compare with her bearing. She immediately waved her hand with a smile and said, Go and have a rest. It's okay. I will be fine, and so will you. Xiao Yenru didn't say much this time. She nodded softly and turned to go out. The further she went out, the colder her face became. After Xiao Yenru left, old madam couldn't suppress the anger on her face anymore. She patted the table hard with her hand and said with a fierce look, Isn't this picture album destroyed? Why didn't I find anything? Nanny Yu's face turned pale in panic and she hurriedly explained, I don't know. It was indeed the result of the previous investigation. It was also said that the fifth Mrs. Servant girl was entangled, so it was impossible for her to find a good painter to make a painting on the spot and bind it so seamlessly. But all of this is seamless. Didn't she do it before? Didn't she tell Pushun Nun's disciple clearly? Old madam still doubted whether there was nothing in it. As for the difference of a piece of paper, so what? Maybe it was another clever trick of Pushun Nun, but they just didn't realize it. I don't know why this happened. This matter was contacted by Huiqing Nun. Huiqing Nun suffered a loss from the fifth miss before, so she hated the fifth miss to the bone. She wouldn't drop the ball at the critical moment, would she? Nanny Yu said bluntly. There was such a big mistake in the matter, and they almost exhausted all their calculations. But at the last moment, they found that there was nothing wrong with the picture album. It was possible to blame it on the 5th Mississippi. When Nanny Yu was waiting outside the hall just now, she was very flustered. After thinking about it, she couldn't figure out why things had changed like this. Where exactly did this go wrong? Let's stop here. We'll talk about it after I get to the Yuhui nunnery. Old madam thought for a while and said decisively. Even if the matter of the picture album was over, she couldn't get any evidence against Xiao Wanru because of the picture album. Originally, she wanted to take the picture album back and find a painter who was proficient in framing. But now the picture album was left in the palace by the Empress Dowager, so she couldn't take it out. Even if she wanted to find clues, she couldn't find it. This matter could only stop here now. Yes, this old servant understands. This old servant will send everyone to the manor. Nanny Yu said cleverly. In fact, there was no need to send them to the village. But now this matter had been reported to the palace. If it was known by others, it might even lead to the crime of deceiving the emperor, which would be troublesome. Well, that's it. Don't act rashly for the time being. Send old maids to the mountain to take care of it. If there is anything needed, send it up. Don't let anything bad happen again. Old Madam rubbed her eyebrows again. Just now, because of the reward from the Empress Dowager, she was no longer in high spirits. She only felt a dull pain all over her body. At the sight of Old Madam's appearance, Nanny Yu also knew that Old Madam's old illness might have recurred. She hurriedly helped her lie down on the couch first, used a cushion to prop up her body, and sent the bracelet of Buddha beads to her hand. Then she picked up the small hammer placed aside, squatted down, and knocked her leg from time to time. Old Madam's hand automatically picked up the Buddha beads, rolled them up one by one, and began to recite scriptures, looking kind and benevolent. Miss, the old maid of Duke Xing's mansion and the servant girl who was punished to kneel have been sent to the village outside the city, which is Old Madam's own village. Qing came to report after lighting the lamp. Have you seen it clearly? Xiao Wanru put down the brush, looked at the picture she had drawn, and asked with a smile. I've seen it clearly. In the evening, the first miss also sent someone up the mountain. It seemed that she had a gift for Pushun Nun, so she went directly to Pushun Nun's place. Later, she didn't come to greet you and went down the mountain directly. Qing told another thing about Xiao Wanru, which was what Xiao Wanru had asked her to keep an eye on. Chu Liuchen's secret guards, who protected Xiao Wanru, were now under Qing's command. Even if others noticed her and the two principal servant girls around her now, no one would notice the inferior servant girl around her. Such a seemingly innocent little servant girl was the most important protection Chu Liuchen gave Xiao Wanru. What do you think of this Pushun Nun? Xiao Wanru asked with her eyes slowly falling on Yujia and Chu Lu. Of course, she was asking them. They had lived in Yuhui Nunnery with her for a period of time and had more contact with the nuns in Yuhui Nunnery. I think this Pushun Nun seems to be really cultivating in seclusion. She almost never takes charge of affairs or presides over religious rites, and she has a good reputation. Chu Lu thought for a while and concluded. Xiao Wanru didn't answer and looked at Yujia again. Yujia frowned and said, Miss, I think this Pushun Nun is very strange. Oh, what's strange about her? Xiao Wanru looked at her encouragingly. In the past, when we were in Jingxin Monastery, Mingqiu Nun was also a transcendent person with superb medical skills. Even if the abbess couldn't cure the disease, Mingqiu Nun would also cure the disease. Sometimes, she just stood beside the abbess and acted as an attendant. She didn't care about fame and fortune the most. I used to feel strange and wondered what Mingqiu Nun wanted to do that. I once asked her and she said that the 6 senses of tranquility of a monk were just for peace of mind. Since Pushun Nun has always been so low-key, why is she so famous and so good? It seems that she has been famous before the first miss came to the mountain to learn painting. If not, the first miss would not come to learn painting from her. Pushun Nun is also a nun, a monk. Humans naturally cultivate in peace, but why is their reputation so great now, so resounding? Yujia said in confusion. Her view was a little different from Chu Li's. She felt strange from the root. Since she entered the Yuhui Nunnery, it was well known that Pushun Nun was not in charge of affairs. She didn't show up in front of others, but she had such a great reputation. Where did this reputation come from? Only a few people knew someone like Mingqiu Nun, but the most famous one was the master of Jingxin Monastery. This Pushun Nun is unusual. This was the conclusion given by Qing. She summed up what Chu Lu and Yujia said and gave the conclusion without hesitation. After finishing her words, she was also stunned for a moment and couldn't help looking at Xiao Wanru. Since she followed the 5th Miss Xiao, Qing had also changed from contempt to respect. No matter how delicate her master looked, she was not an ordinary miss from an aristocratic family in her bones. She was really delicate and useless. This Pushun Nun is indeed unusual. It seems that everything has nothing to do with her directly, but she can get benefits from it. Qing, ask someone to keep an eye on her and pay more attention to her. It seems that she doesn't like to cultivate in peace so much recently. She wants to take action after being so quiet, but I don't know what she will do. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.